And we begin with the real deep dive today, which just kind of really tickles me. I think that this stuff, especially for anybody using their arms like conductors and upper string players, this is some of the most life-changing information. It has been for me, and I've watched it change many people's sounds and their comfort level and their anxiety. So we're going to kind of pick up from where we left off. Both, we had the whole balance section, and yesterday we finished it. We started talking about the legs and kind of got into the bottom half of the body as far as balance goes. But today we get to study where the arms balance over the torso after doing all of that nice work for getting that nice central core. And you're going to just keep reminding yourself as we get started here about where that head balance is, where is the pelvis. Can I explore that rolling of the pelvis a little bit to find out if I can find something a little more central. And then it's going to be easier to find the balance for the arms. So we are talking about freeing the shoulder region to a neutral, and I might add centered balance. I think the word centered is becoming increasingly important to me in my teaching. So just a few slides to help review from yesterday. The collarbone and scapula form one unit. The only way we can move a shoulder blade is if we're moving from arm joint number 1. We tried that. We know that those work together. So we are trying to answer this question: where do the arms belong at rest? And you wouldn't believe how much confusion there is. Well, maybe you will. Maybe you've had your own confusion about it. Where do my arms belong? This is one answer very quickly, watching little people move again. You will see, just the first thing that strikes me when I watch little people is how much space they naturally have in their underarm region. You never see a small child walking with their arms hugging the side of the torso up in this region. There's always a little bit of space. Now, obviously, this arm is moved up a little bit, but there's a real sense of buoyancy and floating in their arms because they are balanced to start with. So this is a goal that we're going to be talking more about. I want to remind you about the discussion of the strong side of the arm, and that it is relevant for all sections of the arm, not just for, yesterday we talked a lot about the wrist region. And when we lose that strong side of the arm, the hand ends up tilting off, usually because of a mismapping at the elbow. But here we have a beautiful example of an orangutan hanging. And I'd like you to just take a hand up into the air and you're going to start tracing the pinky side of the arm. Start at the tip of your pinky and come down. I'll trace it on the orangutan, past the elbow, into the back rim of your armpit, and all the way down to the tip of the shoulder blade. And just wake that side of your arm up. It's the side of the arm that, when we're tensed, gets pulled into the side of the body, and then the brain stops knowing how to delineate what is torso and what is arm. And we want to delineate that, to have our full freedom and strength. So do that on both sides. It also just helps you map, where is the tip of that shoulder blade? Where is the back rim of my underarm? Because that's, of course, remember where the socket is. And that's that X marks the spot we did. We want to know where the socket is at all times. And I'll point out to you a few things. I included this very muddy picture here because I've learned from several sources that when firemen are trained, or policemen are trained, and they're in the gym and they're asked to, they're learning how to climb rope, which they all have to learn how to do, apparently. They're taught to do it without the thumb and the index finger. It's the strength of the grip coming from this side of the hand, and simply because that will encourage the strength through the wrist and not let this distortion happen. So if you've ever been holding a baby in your arms and you've stuck your pinky into their fist, or they've grabbed they will grab here. That is the first thing that develops before that dexterity of the thumb. So there's something really key about understanding that that whole side there. And I've, over the last few years of developing the shoulder region material, I've come to understand it better, why it's so important. So when we lose that strong side of the arm, this is what it looks like. We've talked about this, is all pretty much review. At the thumb, at the hand end of it, it looks like holding up that bottle. You'll notice where the thumb is. Notice that the hand is lined up along the thumb side. And we've started to go into a tilt at the wrist along the pinky side, which pulls the thumb into the side of the hand. Even though there's a bottle in there, this person's thumb is rolling in towards the hand. In other words, the pad of the thumb is not fully squarely on the bottle. The thumb bone has started to rotate in, and that means that there's unnecessary tension in these muscles. And if I stop sharing for a moment, you will all recognize this if you've ever played an upper stringed instrument. You see this frequently in students. See where the thumb is there. Instead of that height, remember the Heifetz picture I showed you yesterday, with this width and freedom and softness in this muscle region here. If we start to pull these two bones into the side of the hand, then you will never fully have the pad on, squarely like that. So one way to work at getting the strong side of the arm back on our instruments, if you're an upper string player, is just to explore what could it be like to play my scales with a really wide V between these two bones, and allowing the thumb to not even just go square, but even what's it like even to roll it even further, because that's going to teach you what a truly opposable thumb is, instead of a thumb that looks like that. And the same thing happens on the bow side. People who have tight muscles in here and are having troubles having a beautiful spiccato, it's almost always that the thumb is some version of, we all know about that problem on the bow. But even if it isn't, doing that thing here, even if it's just pulled into the side instead of coming onto the bow from underneath, our pedagogy even misleads us there. I'll just do a violin viola thing for a moment. Where many of us were taught that we had to hold the bow on this corner of the thumb. And that immediately puts us into that shape with those muscles closing. And once I retrained that opposable thumb and I did all of that tapping, and come swinging from that base joint that we talked about yesterday, then my thumb started coming onto the stick in that kind of very, square on, instead of being over on that side. So I have no idea where that thing came from. Ideally, when you pull a down bow, because you're pulling, you'll have more contact on the other side. Yes, when you do a nut bow, it will be over on that side, because the thumb needs to be able to pivot from side to side like that. But this idea that there's one place for the thumb is just nonsense. And I'm encouraging all pedagogues to re-examine that one, because it does lead to over tension in those thumb muscles. So that's what it looks like when we lose the strong side of the arm at this end. Excuse me. And let's look again at what it looks like when we lose it at the elbow. Just like we talked about yesterday, if people are twisting the ulna, they've lost the line of strength. When we want to shove something or chop something, we want that to be the axis that the other bone moves around. We don't want it to move out of its line, because then we lose our strength. So that's why it's so important for really pre-elbows that we have it here. And like I was saying to Carla yesterday, if you've lost the strong side down on these joints at the thumb, the wrist, the elbow, because you're twisting the wrong bone and the hand is tilted off and the thumb is pulled in, then it's very likely it's going to work its way up into the shoulder region, or it's come from the shoulder region and worked its way down here. It's just a series of compensations. So this violinist, you can see the symptom, the red flag you want to go looking for in yourself and in others. Well, there's a few red flags. One is that the head is forward of balance. 2, there's no space in the underarm. and this is a fabulous violinist, but this bone is being pulled into the side of the body. And actually, right 6 months after this video was taken, this violinist had a career-threatening injury that stopped her tour engagements for a long time. So the other symptom we'll be talking a lot about in a few moments is that winging shoulder blade, when the shoulder blade sticks out like that. So that's the loss of the strong side of the arm up in the upper two arm joints. So just to do a quick review, we want space in the underarm. We want elbows. If you do have space in the underarm, it means your elbows will always be a little further from the side of the body than hugging, for sure. And then when we approach our piano or our computer keyboard or whatever, our bow, if the elbow has that little bit of distance away, it means that we can maintain the strength through the wrist, which means that the thumb is opposable and not pulling in. So these things all go together right up the arm, and we need to see if we can weed out each one one at a time. When we lose the strong side of the arm, that leads us into muscle imbalances in the shoulder region. And so today is the day where we're going to delve a little bit into muscle mapping. There's been very little of it up till now, which is really quite a good thing, because when you get into muscles, it becomes so much more complex. There's 800 and something of them in the body. And it's a lot easier to see what bones are designed to do. And Barbara stuck to that, but she did know the importance of mapping muscles. And I think these ones are essential. So I want you to, for a moment, stick your arm out to the side like I'm doing. And draw a hand now along the thumb side, what we might call the top side of the arm. And I'd like you to imagine that that's the top piece of bread of a peanut butter sandwich. So that's one layer of muscles. Now draw a line kind of right dead center, because that's indicating where the bones are in between. That's like your peanut butter. And then draw another line along the pinky side, and that's like the bottom piece of bread. Okay, so we kind of have a layer of muscle, we have a layer of bone, and a layer of muscle underneath. When we become super engaged in the muscles along the top side, which is another way of saying when you've lost the sense of the strong side of the arm under here, these muscles become overworked and the muscles under here become underworked. And it's a lot like when we go to raise our arms that way, it's a lot like trying to lift a sandwich up off a plate by lifting the top piece of bread only, and hoping that the peanut butter is sticky enough that the rest of the sandwich is going to come along. So ideally, of course, what we would do if we did want to use a little bit of force on that upper piece of bread, this is more like what we would do with an arm, because we want an even distribution of muscle. So let's say we started to lift the sandwich a bit that way, but then we could scoop our hand underneath the sandwich and also help from underneath. And that's what we're looking for, is a sense of that there's some muscles working on top, but it's also supported from under. And when we get that support from underneath, that's when we can really learn what it could feel like to release down. All of that, shoulders down stuff comes possibly from a very innocent sensation a teacher once had of, oh, that feels better when I let those muscles go. But if you let those muscles go when you don't have anything under here that's working to catch it, you are going to end up damaging yourself far worse by ending up down on top of your ribs with the bones pulling down. So it's a really tricky area to work with, and it deserves some extra special time. The other analogy I sometimes use is these heavy velvet curtains. If you get on your step ladder to take them down to wash them, what you probably don't want is to just lift them down from the curtain rod above, because they might be so heavy it's going to knock you off your ladder. What would ideally be is if you've got somebody underneath lifting the curtain from underneath as you're lifting the curtain rod down. So there's some upward support from beneath, you've got some support from above, and it's balanced. And again, it's just another way of thinking about this, what the sensation that we're looking for when we want to release more of the stuff here that we all get so tight in, and find more support from underneath. So we'll start looking at muscles after we look at some of these these lines from famous pedagogues who didn't study very much anatomy, but certainly knew what it could feel like. And I'm not going to, you'll notice I say it's attributed because this is all hearsay. This is passed down from other people saying, oh, I heard Joseph Gingold once said. So attributed to Gingold telling people to air out the armpits when they're playing violin. That, in other words, that you're not going to close down the underarm region. You need to feel as if there's air that can travel through. Weilerstein, shine beams of light out from your armpits when you're playing down to the floor. See what you can try these on, see what that feels like. It's going to engage a different set of muscles for some of you. For some people, these analogies don't work at all. But as having a sense of where the armpit is in the first place and that it's open and that there's something active happening there. Armpit air attributed to Tuttle. And I've heard hollow out your armpits, not sure where that was supposed to come from, but it's been repeated enough. So they all have this idea of having space there. And that has everything to do with stopping the muscles that pull the humeral bone into the ribs. And so that's part of what we have to be working on. And the muscle that you're going to be feeling, doing a bit more of the work, there are many, but this is one of them, is this guy. It's called the serratus anterior. And its primary job is not to support the arms, yes, but also to make sure that when we do move an arm into humeroscapular rhythm, that the shoulder blade, this is kind of one of the connectors, that the shoulder blade will travel smoothly like the caboose following the train. You see that it attaches, if you look at my video for a moment on my model, it doesn't attach on this part of the shoulder blade. This is the inside part that, if my ribs are here, this is resting against the ribs, and then the back of the shoulder blade is here. So the muscle comes underneath and attaches on the inside edge, right? If you look at my cursor now, right in there. And so when these muscle fibers shorten, which is what a muscle does when it contracts, it's going to pull the shoulder blade smoothly around the ribs like that. And that's a really healthy movement for a whole arm. If any of you have ever heard an analogy of when we're bowing or when the violin is up, to feel as if we've got a big oak tree in here, that's partly the sensation of shoulder blade traveling. The arm is traveling around the ribs, and that's the primary mover will be that muscle, the serratus anterior. And so here it is again as a part of the family of deep support muscles. So we can build on everything we talked about in the first 2 days of finding that TVA. You can either find it by messing about with the pelvic floor muscles or the tilt of the pelvis or the magnet up here, or even just finding more head balance will turn on some of these deep support muscles. And guess what? These guys are a part of that system, and you will be able to access them better if the rest of that deep support is already working. So as I said at the beginning of the course, this is additive work. We need to find these basics first, and then it's time to go to the arms and see how positively they're affected. I wonder if any of you have, this is one thing I did not ask you to prepare, but if any of you have one of these rollers, a yoga, I don't know what they're called, foam rollers, maybe, these things, go ahead and get one. And if you don't, you can either roll up a yoga mat and use it as a roller, or you can roll up a blanket. And we'll just see how the arms are affected by turning on those deep support muscles before we go any further. So I'll just give you all a moment to find something that you can use like that. And this is a very, very similar exercise to the one we did on Wednesday with the head lifting. You remember we lifted a head, and we did it with a completely slack belly. We didn't try to turn on any muscles, and we noticed that there was a lot more work going on in the front neck muscles, the superficial muscles, because they were not only moving the head up off the floor, they were also holding on to it. And we didn't have that deep multifidus muscles working for us. So we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to go completely slack. You're going to lie in a moment. You're going to lie on your back on the roller. And with a completely slack torso, as slack as you can, you're going to start waving an arm with a fair bit of momentum across the body like that. And notice what happens to your torso on the roller. And then you're going to, you can either do it by bringing the pelvic floor up and checking the TVA with your hands, or if you'd rather get a little closer to what we're in reality going to be using when you're performing, just think about that magnet. You can still check the TVA and hopefully you'll still feel some firmness with your fingers. Remember, we were checking down here. We were poking in here. So finding that sense of these two places falling towards one another. Check with your breathing to make sure that you're not just tightening everything in your belly. And once you have those on again, you're going to go back and you're going to wave your arm again. And then you're going to come back and tell me what you noticed, what changed from the first way to the second way. So go ahead. I'll give you a minute or two to try that.
Sorry, how do we put this? Do we lay our back on it or?
Put it lengthwise, and your spine, you're going to be lying lengthwise. Your spine is down it. Yeah. And if yours is as short as mine is, you may need a pillow under your head. Some of you will have longer ones, but you definitely need your pelvis and your head supported.
Jennifer, I'm sorry, I was running to get the mat when you were
Okay.
explaining what we should do. Can you
You
repeat?
betcha. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure other people will benefit. So you take your roller and you put it lengthwise and you put your spine along it lengthwise. And with your knees bent is probably better. So bend your knees if you haven't already, with your feet on the floor. And if this is too short, make sure your head is supported by a pillow. And then you let your belly go completely slack and you wave an arm across your body with a fair bit of momentum back and forth, and notice what your torso feels like. You might even fall right off the roller. And then you find your deep support muscles again, whichever way you prefer. You can pull up on the pelvic floor if you need that much, and check with your fingers that the TVA is working and wave your arm again. Or if you just want to go to the magnet between the two parts of the ribs, you can let your ribs be drawn together gently. Make sure you can breathe well, wave your arm again, and see what the difference is. And if you can't tell enough difference between the first way and the second way, and maybe you just used the magnet, go ahead and do a full-on pull-up in the pelvic floor muscles, like stopping peeing, and you will probably immediately notice a difference, even though that's not what I'm recommending that you do throughout the day. I should also mention, if I didn't say this earlier, that when you find that neutral tilt of the pelvis in your sitting and standing, that naturally brings on the tone in the pelvic floor muscles. Most people's pelvic floor muscles go slack because of mostly it's because of sitting, too far back in a slump. But being in military isn't great for them either. So come on back when you're ready and let me know. You can just unmute and let me know what it is that you noticed.
Mostly a range of motion.
Which one did you have more range of motion for?
I don't know, both improved.
I don't mean which arm. I mean, what the first way or the second way?
Well, when it was activated,
Yep. Okay, great, super. And there's a reason for that. Let's hear some other people's comments first. What else did you notice? Anybody notice how your torso felt different on the roller?
I just felt more stable.
Right. Yeah. That it's not as wobbly, right? Like you didn't feel like you were going to fall off. Olga.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so similar. When I was waving without the core engagement, my roller was rolling to the side, where kind of following the direction of the arm movement.
Right.
And like with the momentum, and then with some core engagement, it was less of it, just less
Right.
of it.
Right. And that's why what Olga said so nicely there, that's why Ina experienced more range of motion for the arm, because there's a stable column of support that it can move around, and your brain knows instinctively there's no danger of you, taking the whole torso and with it and falling. Or so imagine, well, let's not imagine, let's pick up the violins or your baton and just play a few really fast martelé strokes with the bow. So, throw your arm, and if you're conducting, then big gestures, and do it without any deep support, and then do it with support. Okay, so let's unmute one more time and just see. I will preface it by saying, of course, this is going to be a little more challenging upright. It's easier to feel this stuff when you're on the floor. It's especially easier to feel it on a roller, which is why we do it, to enhance the experience. But I'd love to hear if any of you could feel the difference in your actual music making. Yeah, Margie, you could feel something change?
Absolutely. And
Can
it
you-
made me think of all the times I'm trying to get my students to play a good martelé, and like, what,
Yeah.
there's nothing there.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. If you're all floppy and through here, it's not going to feel safe to throw an arm with the speed that we require for a good martelé. Yeah. What else? Is there anybody who absolutely couldn't feel the difference when you were standing upright? Yep, that's fine, Ina. It took me months, I will be honest with you, but it was worth it. I kept at it. So I recommend you keep at it. And again, Ina, who knows? You might be one of those people, because you are very active. You said yesterday, right?
Or maybe right after doing that previous exercise, they're still engaged because
Yeah.
it's so recent.
It might be, and it could just be that you are already quite toned. Those of us who were completely slack, who, weren't doing a whole lot of, gym work, for instance, are probably going to feel the bigger difference. And I was in that category, certainly. So it's, we don't want to have, and this is a note to all of you trainees, we can't have this preconceived notion that just because it was our experience that other people, everybody's body is coming from a different starting place. So we always have to acknowledge that. How about our two conductors in the room? Anything to report there that you could tap into?
I just feel more stable, and I worked as a pianist first on body mapping, then because I'm a pianist, vocalist, and conductor, but the conducting is still what I struggle with the most.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was
But
more stability. You felt there was just
Mhm.
more. Yeah,
Yes.
I was watching you two in particular, because I know what to expect in string players. So I was watching the two of you and seeing a really nice sense of course, what you want in front of an orchestra, of poise. There just was a sense of poise and integrity, and in addition to technically being able to move the arms more freely, that's a great thing. Anything you want to add to that, to Danielle?
I think it's just a nice reminder to hear that need to always remember that my experience is different and also to trust that
Yeah.
because of my pelvic floor injury, my tendency that I've been trying to correct is actually I'm like a hyper holder, hold my ass all the time because I was so afraid of being incontinent.
Right.
And so I've been kind of going the other way, trying to
Good.
trust that and realize. So going between those two equilibriums, I think for me, like I can go either this way or be too slack and trying to find where that place of support and buoyancy is.
Good. So for you in particular, it might be very important to be looking for that deep support, starting somewhere else besides the pelvic floor. Just starting with that sense of the magnet, you know, this coming together, test your breathing. Can I still breathe freely? Oh, yes, I still feel 360 around. Oh, look at that. I've still got a bit of snugness here. It's, yes, my TVA is on. And then if you put your attention on the pelvic floor, you'll probably notice there is some tone in it. It's probably between hyper tensed and completely slack. And then you know that you've got your deep support working for your spine. Yeah. But yes, trusting your body is, oh boy, ugh. Always trust what your brain is telling you over what somebody else is saying. It doesn't matter who it is, because that's where your wisdom is. But of course, we have to learn how to listen to it first if we haven't been very good at that. All right. So now we dive into the section where we look at the common mismappings in this shoulder region. This is basically a summary of my third book with obviously not as much detail. But what I established, and there are probably more patterns, but these are the 5 most common patterns that you see in musicians' shoulder regions. Number 1 is hunched up, which right from the time we had our first lesson, teachers were saying, you know, don't do that, don't hunch. That means you're tight. And there's a good point to that for sure. The number 1 is sloping shoulders, by which I mean where the collarbone gets pulled straight down the side. And, you know, we can all, if you think of old portraits of women from Victorian times or even before that, it's unbelievable how many times that was considered a thing of beauty for women in that time was slopey, you know, beautiful ivory sloping shoulders. I mean, how many times do we read that in literature? This idea that somehow that's feminine. It's hogwash. It's really damaging to arms. Military shoulders, I think you know what that means when they get pulled back, trying to stand up straight. Round shoulders, we're familiar with. That usually means the spine also accompanying a curve, a forward curve. And then RSMS just stands for a combination of round shoulders and military shoulders, which I sometimes refer to as the double whammy. So the first thing I'd like you to do with your fingers is form a shape like this, where you're going to have the middle finger sticking out and then bring your index finger down a little bit. And what we're doing is mimicking this V. So the top finger, your middle finger, is representing the collarbone. And the index finger pointing down a little bit is representing this ridge of the shoulder blade. These are 2 extremely important landmarks to know where, kinesthetically, where are my shoulders in space? And you know, am I at neutral or have they gone into a pattern? So I want you to try all of these patterns with your fingers doing this. In other words, you're going to, I'll do it with the model here, but as long as you understand that the fingers, you've got this as a model here. So you're modeling the shoulder blade like this. So let's take our fingers and we're going to go into hunched up. That's where the whole thing gets pulled up towards the ear like that. So basically just shoulders up and in. Sloping shoulders is the opposite, being pulled straight down. Military is being pulled straight back. So with your fingers, you'd be doing this, right? If this is your collarbone, then you're pulling back like that. So hunched up, sloping, military. Round shoulders is a forward rotation. So you can rotate your middle finger like that. And then the 5th one, the double whammy, is rotated forward and pulled back at the same time. Just so that you kind of have some model to refer to for, you know, those 2 landmarks. Okay, so let's look at each of these individually. Hunched up and sloping. We'll deal with these together. Neither one of them is great. But this one is definitely more damaging. Even though we've always been told not to hunch and not to get, to get our shoulders down. The reason it's more damaging is that the collarbone, which should be suspended lightly over the ribs, when it gets pulled down on top of the ribs, we impinge nerves and blood vessels which run between those two bones all the way down the arm and into the hand. So the most common place where people get tingling in their hands, if there's or just chronically cold hands, that is usually coming from a shoulder structure which is too low. Now, there are other places it can happen at, including impingement at the wrist. That's part of carpal tunnel syndrome. But I usually start with this one first to rule it out. And is there anybody in the room, if I just stop sharing for a second, is there anybody in the room who has chronically cold hands? Who just kind of wishes that their hands would be warmer when they walk on stage to play? Yeah, that was me for 20 years.
I have Raynaud's, but I think you also told me that my shoulders are not in the right place.
Sitting pretty low. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I once worked with a percussionist who had 10 years of just his hands who had never been warm. And we got some of these. This is where your rolled up washcloth or bubble wrap, whatever you found, is going to come into it. And we're just going to put that rolled up thing. I use, by the way, this is pipe insulation from the hardware store. It's nice and squishy and spongy, which is good. That's why bubble wrap works well if you have it. And you're just going to stick one under each arm, or if you, it's fine if you only have one. And you're not going to squeeze them to hold them in place there. You're just going to let your arm drape over top of that roll. And, if it's a washcloth, fine. Just make sure it's big enough that it actually, has enough support that it's kind of going to give you a sense of upward support from underneath. And this is the first way that we can kind of start to find neutral. The percussionist I was working with, we put these in, and within seconds, he was crying. He said, "Oh my God, feel my hands, they're warm." And I mean, some people, it really is that simple. They just have to get that bone up off of the ribs and the blood starts flowing again. Others of us, it takes a little bit longer, but these, I carry these with me still if I'm traveling, especially if I'm on a plane, because those seats are so horrible. I have a little pillow right behind my back so that my head isn't being pushed forward. And I have these under my arms to make sure that my arms aren't going to pull down. And you can do almost everything, in your seat there with that nice support from underneath. So some people love them. Most people love them. Occasionally people get new tingling because they happen to have a nerve that's a little closer to the surface, and sometimes that's hits on it. So you might want to experiment with just how far back or how far forward you have it. And some people need bigger, round, more diameter than others. So it's something to explore. But I highly recommend you have some in your studio, and that you can help your students. If you don't want to do a full body mapping session with them, just put these under their arms and let them drape their arms over top of it. So the mapping of the arms too low is far more dangerous than mapping them into hunching. Even though hunching isn't great, it does mean that there's extra muscular work here. But when we pull down on them, usually there's still work going on up here. And now we've added new downwards pull and we're in danger. So caution of low shoulders. That's not something desirable. No more getting your shoulders down. And you might want to just start checking your pedagogical language. This is one picture of fascia, which I showed you briefly yesterday. It attaches along the collarbone and the shoulder blade, and it allows the arm structure to float and move freely over the ribs. I'm going to show you another picture of fascia off of a cadaver. So if you're squeamish, you may want to avert your eyes. But this is I think the biggest piece of fascia that's ever been, it's very, very difficult to remove in a piece. And they got all of it except the very, the hands and the top of the head there. But you can see how it takes our shape. In fact, it makes our shape. It goes around all of our organs and our muscles. You can see the outline of muscles here. And it's like a stretchy diver's scuba diving suit. And so if we start, hauling down on it more on one side than on another, like many upper string players end up being more compressed on the left side under the violin or the viola, then the fascia starts to shrink on that side. It's like shrink wrap. And then we're working against the fact that there's an imbalance in the fascia. So just a little bit of fascial mapping there, understanding that we want the arms to feel suspended. So let's put our rollers back under our arms if you took them out. And the way Barbara used to teach it was she would simply have people go straight up towards the ears and actually go into a hunch and notice that these muscles have to work in order to do that. And then just slowly, bit by bit, come down, pause about halfway and say, you're still working, but it's less. And then continue to where it feels like that muscular work has stopped. And especially if you have this support here, you will not end up into your habitual, which might have been, your habitual starting point might have been there. So they just help kind of prevent you from bypassing neutral. And then we're going to do the same thing going down. So pull your collarbones all the way down and see if that's familiar at all. I hope it isn't, but it might be. That's, where people end up when they're told to get their shoulders down. And I want to see if we can float up from there and arrive at the same place that you found from above. So that's a very simple way of, being able to kind of get an idea, a rough idea of where neutral is. Now let's try one other thing that I've developed, which is, if I were in the room with you, I'd be doing this for you and it would be a lot easier, but you're still going to try it on your own. If you do have kind of a hole there in the middle of whatever you've rolled up, you can stick your thumb through it or just grab onto one end of it, however you can. And I want you to just start jiggling. So you're using this hand to try to jiggle a passive arm structure. And then after you've, tried to get a little bit of looseness there, I want you to just let it come to rest again. And you're going to go up about half an inch or maybe an inch. And just watch my shoulder region once. You're going to notice that these muscles wanted to help. So even though my intention was to only use this arm, this is starting to help. And I'm going to pause and I'm going to go, oh, look at that. I can let that go a little bit. And then I'm going to push it up some more with the other hand. And I'm going to go, oh, look at that. It's tried to help again. And then I'm going to keep doing that until I can get to a point where I can push it up. And these muscles are already trained. They're just going to ride. And it's just kind of a constant release message that you're sending to this area up here. So give that a whirl for a moment. See if you can find something, a new neural pathway into these tight trapezius muscles. And there's others, levator scapulae, maybe even rhomboids. And start to get a sense of what it could feel like to just release down, but on top of an upwards force. Because eventually that's what your own muscles are going to give you under here. And we'll get to that before the end of today. And of course, if you have a partner to stand on either side of you with their fingers in the spacer like that, doing the lifting, you can release down over it. That's an easier way to learn it. But if you don't, you can train your brain to do this. So that's kind of an enhanced version of how Barbara talked about the up and down place of balance for the arm structure. Now we go to the military shoulder, which is simply a result of people trying to stand up straight. So go ahead and go into military where you push the chest up and the spine has a big arch in it in the back. And you'll notice that it dumps your shoulder blades together. Just naturally, they get pushed together. And then you get used to that and you end up holding on to them in that place. And you know, this is not neutral, what we see here, even though this was from an advertisement for some kind of brace that was supposed to help, you know, find whatever, shoulders back. So you can do the same kind of exercise with your spacers. You can just pin them all the way back on purpose, but this time try not to let your spine go into the pushing forward. Try to find a bit of balance through the spine and independently peel the shoulder blades back and gradually, little by little, just release a bit. Notice those muscles are still working between the shoulder blades. Release a little more, release a little more, you know, until you've basically reached a place of no work in those muscles back between the shoulder blades. These are kind of just little shortcuts for getting closer to neutral. There are 16 muscles that we are dealing with in this whole shoulder region. So there, you know, it takes much longer than mapping a 3-jointed thumb, for instance, because you're dealing, it's a very, very complex muscular region. So there's our fine feathered friend again, you know, doing that whole postury thing and pushing forward to get the violin up, because we've always been told, get your violin up. So people do that with the spine, and that pushes the shoulder blades together. And then the arms aren't free to do what we need, and we've lost our deep support muscles. So no more of that. Let's stop using that phrase, stand up straight. Because when the arms are balanced, they will be centered. So here's your V again that you made with your fingers earlier. And you'll notice that the point of that V is pointing straight out to the side when they are truly at neutral. So that's another landmark. If you walk your fingers along the end to find the end of the collarbone, and then there'll be a little hollow between the shoulder blade and the collarbone. And that will more or less, when you're fully at neutral, that will be pointing straight out to the side of the body underneath the ear. But I'm going to wager that many of you will not find that in this moment, because we haven't dealt with the round shouldered issue yet. And that's what can really help fix and center. Fix is a terrible word. I don't mean hold, I mean center the upper arm structure. So notice that there's a lot of space between the shoulder blade and the spine when we are finding neutral. And there's way more, I mean, the shoulder blade has to be around the side of the body in order for the socket to be at the side, for the ball to sit in and hang down the side. So that takes us to round shoulders. And when we get into the slightly more complex mismapping of a rotational movement at the collarbone, there's the collarbone, and if you look at the video of me, and you will notice that it has about 15 to 18 degrees of rotation available. Now, this is not something that Barbara wasn't even working with this rotation very much, and it was hugely important for me as a violinist to figure this out for both sides, because I was so forwardly rotated. I had all my other places of balance. I'd been working on it, and it still felt like the violin was slipping away from me, or I was gripping. So we want to muscle map a little bit first. I want you to find this bony protrusion on yourself. Believe it or not, this is your shoulder blade. Here's your collarbone up here, but you can feel this part of your shoulder blade from the front of the body. It looks like this in 3D. It's this. It sprouts off of, there's the socket, it sprouts off of the front of the socket, and it's called the coracoid process. And most people will find that if you're a woman, you mostly it's under a bra strap. So just make sure you're not on the collarbone. Find the collarbone first, roughly where the bra strap is, and come straight down, and then do kind of a circular massaging deeply like that. And you should start to feel a bony protrusion there. It's easier to find on some people than others, but go ahead and get, if you think you found it, get your fingers on it and start waving the arm around, or even, you know, just notice that when you move your shoulder blade like that, that bony bump will be moving, because it is the shoulder blade. So knowing that about that bony landmark that's a pretty good one to be able to track what's happening, where the shoulder blade is in space. Is it tilted forward into round shoulders or not? When this muscle, which attaches onto that coracoid process, when this muscle tightens, it's going to do this to a shoulder blade. It starts to, the whole shoulder blade starts to get pulled up the surface of the back, and particularly up the surface and then also into the spine. This is a right side shoulder blade. So the spine would be over here, and that's what's happening. And this is not the only muscle, but it has some other culprits that help it. So that's the pectoral minor, and then the pectoral major muscle. It also attaches onto the collarbone and the humerus. So when those muscle fibers shorten, it not only pulls the humerus into the side of the body and forwardly rotates it, but it also pulls the collarbone into forward rotation towards. So we have that rounding coming from two different joints. The collarbone is rotating forward, and the ball in the socket is rotating forward. So we're going to be targeting these muscles a lot today and trying to find softness and release here, so that we can, while we're playing, this is where I want to get you to today, that while you're playing, you have dug enough of a neural pathway to send release messages to these muscles to be able to release back without pulling the shoulder blades back. It's a very different thing. It's a releasing out of a forward rotation instead of a pulling straight back. So these are the overworking chest muscles, and we've just talked about what happens at arm joint 1. And now we'll have a better look at what happens at arm joint 2. So when these muscles contract, it's doing this to the humerus. The ball of the humerus is getting pulled forward. And what we want to start learning more about what it could feel like for these underworking muscles, which are 2 of your rotator cuff muscles in the back. So these attach between these 2 bones on the back, like that. And when those guys start working more, that's when you're not going to need these spacers anymore, because those are some of the muscles, plus the serratus anterior we saw earlier, that's going to give you your own upward support in order to release your peanut butter sandwich down on top of that support, like a butler's tray almost underneath your sandwich. So let's look at some of the signposts of, we peeked at this earlier when I was talking about losing the strong side of the arm, but musicians who play from round shoulders will always have this ridge of the shoulder blade in a horizontal position. And remember, we went looking for that yesterday. See if you can find that ridge on yourself again. So walk, find some kind of bony landmark over here at the side back. And then I generally just do this to people. I just roll my fingers over that until I've made sure that I can kind of tell where it is. And then I can judge, is it on a diagonal or is it on one of these horizontals? When it's at neutral, it will look like this with a nice steep diagonal. But when we go into round shoulders, remember I said the tip of the shoulder blade gets pulled towards the spine. The forward rotation at the front is actually dragging the tip of the shoulder blade in. And this is the way you're going to know if that's happening. That's your bony landmark right there. So if you're feeling something that's more like that, or even that, you've got a lot of release work to do in these front chest and upper arm muscles. These, by the way, are all part of thumb side or top side muscles. And everything under here that I'm showing you, we're going to be strengthening as part of the pinky side or the strong side muscles. So these 2 violinists have this in common. There's the ridge, just like over here. Also, you can see it pretty clearly right there. And as I pointed out earlier, the humerus will always be hugging the side. So you lose the space under the arm. You notice how close the humerus is to the side of the ribs here. If you had muscle on there, it would be squeezed right up against the side of the body. And this is where we get very tight levator scapulae muscles. If your massage therapist have ever told you that that's one that gets tight, because it's pulling up on that side of the shoulder blade. It's getting pulled down into rotation in the front and then swiveled and up this side. So this side is coming down. This side is getting pulled up. And the rhomboids usually are tight because this side of the shoulder blade is being pulled in, and that's a chronic thing. Now, this is where, I know some people call this getting very nerdy, anatomy nerd, but I just love this stuff. And I think it's It's about time that upper string players and conductors, anybody whose arms are up, it's about time that we had this information and figured out how to stop doing this to ourselves. So of course, all of these muscles are bunged up and tight because the shoulder region is not sitting like that balanced horse saddle. It's pulled down the front now. And we're going to be hanging on to the arms with all of these muscles. This, to contrast, is what a really healthy shoulder blade looks like. There's our favorite violinist again. You can, before I even draw the line, you can see how clearly that shoulder blade is on that ridge. Notice how far the side of her shoulder blade is from the spine. It's way over at the side of her body. She's up in 7th position. And look at the space here. And look at the poise of her head. So round shoulders often goes, always, I'm going to say always, goes with a head that is dragged forward like that. Here's a really poised image of Pierre Fournier playing the cello. Same thing, poised head. He's not coming up the cello by rolling forward at the collarbone. He's coming around, which means that the shoulder blade is traveling to the side of the body. And here we can see a really healthy ridge. And we can see that these muscles are longer and the tip of the shoulder blade is closer to the side. It's not being dragged in that direction towards the spine. So that's what the difference, that's what the two of them looks like. Side by side. So how do we find it? Well, we're certainly not going to find it by, here we are in a slump and grandma says, get your shoulders back. You're slouching. If I'm tight in the pectoral muscles and the front deltoids, and it's pulling me into that forward slump, the last thing I want to do is ignore those and just try to pull the shoulder blades back. It might give me a little bit of a stretch here, but it's the wrong direction. We can't correct it. If it's gone wrong by rotating forward, pulling back on it is not going to help. It's going to make matters worse because then we're still tight on the front. Now we're tight also on the back, and we have a tug of war set up. So we have to undo that forward rotation and all of that chronic pulling down and forward that happens. So this little video, I'm going to play it for you. This is a little taste of something I made for the teaching manuals for the body mapping organization. And it's just easier than trying to reorganize my skeleton behind me. So we're going to go ahead and try this exercise along with the video. This video will demonstrate a movement exploration that helps us regain neutral for the arm structure when we've been in a chronic round-shouldered pattern. When the head and the upper torso round forward into a chronic slump, the collarbone will often be participating in that by rotating forward at its joint with the sternum, which in the back draws the shoulder blade up and over the top of the ribs. So in order to undo this pattern, we're going to think about taking the collarbones a little bit in the opposite direction in order to find the middle ground in between those two extremes. We're going to take an arm bent at the elbow. So go ahead and try this. Point it straight at the ceiling. Scoop some of the overshortened muscles that tend to draw it down and forward. And I'll just pause there to give you long enough to do that and really give it a good little massage. You're pushing up on them. You're saying to them, you guys have to let go in order for me to take my arm here. It's not helping if you're pulling in the opposite direction. So we scoop up, we scoop in upwards, backwards rotation. And all the while that your arm is up there, you're thinking about how that collarbone has been taken past its neutral into a backwards extreme, a backwards rotation. Just 2 words of warning, make sure that as you do this, you're not doing it with your spine. It isn't a pulling back of the spine. So try to stay centered over your sit bones, find that middle part of the pelvic floor. And when the arm gets up, make sure it doesn't push your head forward off of balance. Keep an awareness of the back of your head. So you've got the ears over top of the sit bones. And once you're up there, you might also notice that these muscles want to start helping, like when we had these things in. So do another similar kind of releasing down, even though the bones are up. You're safe to release down here because you're not going to crush any of your blood vessels or nerves. The collarbone has been taken so far up. It's a safe place to practice releasing. And when you feel like you've been up there long enough, don't bring your hand down the front because that will take your collarbone into its habit. Take the arm up, turn and come down the side. So your palm is facing the side of your body. And I'll just notice what I look like at the end of this. Unbend at the elbow and slowly come down to the side of the body. And notice how you feel different in your own bodies. Take note of how you feel different from side to side. Do you see the difference? Do you see that this has a bit more of a squareness and a breadth and a release in here, where this is a bit bunched up and rolled forward still? Hard to see with the sweater on. So we're going to stop sharing, and I just want you to unmute and tell me if you can feel the difference between the two sides of what you've just done there. Notice
Yeah,
if
I feel.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just feel almost completely twisted.
Yeah.
Now this feels so much further back, and I feel like the shoulder's totally forward.
Right.
So I'm about to do this side because I feel lopsided.
Great. Do the other side, especially if you were able to have that moment and really feel the difference between the two. So let's make sure that we're not lopsided or twisted. Again, you're thinking about this coming only from this joint. Yes, the shoulder blade is moving, but it starts here, not the head forward, not the spine arching back. And then scoop. Let these muscles back here just settle. Even as other muscles are helping supporting up here, you're going to let these guys go to bare minimum. And then unbend at the elbow and come down the side. And see if that gives you any more symmetry in your body. Notice that they might be higher. The collarbones might be higher than you're used to. This can also really help undo anybody who's pulled straight down. So the straight down and the forward rotation often go together. Ballet dancers are the only ones I can think of who regularly are open across here, but are pulling straight down. So it depends on what your background is. Now, before we go to the instruments and start our music making, I want you to understand something really important, especially this is for upper string players. And even if our conductors in the room ever conduct strings, this would be an amazing thing to do as a warm-up, you know, in an orchestra. Just get them. I think I can't wait for the day when conductors are actually taking care of their orchestra, even if it's a fully professional orchestra. If they see people doing things to their bodies that are harmful, noticing and taking a 3-minute break to give them some ideas on how they can find more balance. So what I want you to understand about a collarbone is that it is not round. It's misleading. If we have it mapped as completely round, who cares what point the violin or the viola sits on it? But the truth is that there is a top side, there are two sides, and there is a bottom. And if we are putting a violin or a viola on a collarbone that is tilted like that, we are asking it to sit on the edge. And that is why it feels so insecure when it's sitting on the collarbone with that tilt. So another word for round shoulders in my life is violin shoulder. We have tennis elbow, golf elbow. This is violin shoulder. And that search for, you know, a shoulder rest or a pad that we are constantly pushing that into the back of the instrument, trying to be secure, will cause these pectoral muscles to just be so shortened. So that's why we're putting so much attention on figuring out how to release them. So this first little exploration is kind of baby steps. This is the beginner's way of figuring out what it could feel like to be at neutral. And now that you've found a bit of neutral there, your collarbone the top surface should be pointing up to the ceiling more. That's going to make a completely different feeling for a violin to sit on. I gave a lesson not long ago to a pretty famous violinist who, I mean, just amazing player, but was playing a caprice that was feeling a little insecure at the end of it. The violin was just starting to feel a little insecure by the time he got to the end of this Paganini caprice. And that's all he needed to know, was that if he started going there, the violin was going to start falling off because it wasn't sitting on a nice flat platform anymore. That's not to say that we're going to put it there and keep it there. Of course, it has to move. And sometimes it's going to have to do that. It's not a bad movement. It's just harmful if we get stuck there and we don't know how to release back to neutral again. So let's especially those of you who are going to put a violin or viola up here. Do the left arm one more time and have your instrument handy. So we scoop, we release these muscles, we scoop some more, we release. This on the left side is important because so many violinists and violists tilt and pull, these muscles get shorter, so that scooping up the left feels pretty good on most of us. Bring it down the side, and then bring your violin in. And this, of course, is going to be more important for those people who are already putting a violin on the collarbone. Some of you might be using a big shoulder rest and aren't using the collarbone much, but if you have been using the collarbone already, you may feel quite a difference of just how incredibly flat. I mean, and I don't mean flat because you've done this with your spine or you've done that with your head. I mean, it's sitting on a flat bone underneath it. And the jawbone doesn't have to do anything but nod from its buttery smooth AO joint. So just play a few notes and see if there's anything that you can report back about that. Yeah, choral folder, that's an excellent idea, Danielle, to just practice raising that. And as the arm comes up, that very movement, like we said yesterday, is going to start to take the collarbone into backwards rotation. That is a part of raising an arm, is allowing these muscles to release up the front, and there's a sense of dumping down the back. And then purposely upper string players go into that violin shoulder, viola shoulder thing, where you're just going to roll in as if you're searching for the back of the instrument. And then compare, notice what does that make the violin feel like now? Even though we think that that's going to give us more security, notice how that feels in your body. What does that do to your breath? And then just before we have some answers from you, bring your violin down in front of you like this, and maybe put your bows down and put a finger on your collarbone. And notice that when you take the violin up, let's take it right to the ceiling, that part of that action is the collarbone rotating backwards, almost as if you wanted to take it right back behind your head back here. Just, it's just a version of that exercise where we're bending the elbow. We're lifting an arm up the front and we're asking the collarbone to go into that place. And then bring it in again. And ideally, you will find that it's a little closer to your jawbone because you've allowed the collarbone to come up. You're not pushing down on the collarbone like that. And it's also flat because it's in a neutral rotation. So let's unmute and just have a brief discussion about what you found out, and then we'll carry on.
I'm super fascinated by the not just pulling back, to be the opposite or whatever, or the front, and
Right.
that it's really more about rotation and how helpful that is. And I think I'm also, must be like opposite or something in my brain. I'm just really confused by this witchcraft that somehow releasing my pecs would help when what feels so bloody tight and horrible is the trap.
Yeah.
And so I'm really surprised, like I don't feel tight, that releasing that, even though I don't feel like that's the thing that's tight and grabbing, how that can have an effect. So that's
Right.
surprising.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I didn't think to say that. Yes, these are the culprits. They yank us out of center, but these are tonic muscles. And so we do not feel pain here in the same way that we feel in here, which are phasic muscles. And I mean, occasionally I have met a violinist who has actually said, I am so tired in my pecs, I need a massage here. But most of us feel it here because these muscles are going, whoa, whoa, come back, come back, come back. So they're fighting each other. But when we get these guys released, these become so much softer because the bones aren't pulling on them anymore and they're not having to hang on to them. I mean, this was one of my original injuries too. And I wouldn't say I'm squishy back there, but it's so much softer than when I go into my old pattern. So basically what this whole thing is doing is recentering the shoulder girdle over the ribs. And what I forgot to have you do was if you go up here and you feel, well, we'll do that in a second. Let's just hear a couple more comments before we move on. Anything else anybody wants to add about what that felt like with the instrument? Yeah, Carla.
I almost felt like I don't even need my sponge.
Fantastic. Good.
But I'm a little scared to not use it. So I think it's sort of like this mental issue now.
The sponge has a terrific role because it prevents slippage. And when we do shift up into high positions and we have humeroscapular rhythm, and this is rotating back and we're coming up, this part of the shoulder region will come into the back of the instrument, and it's lovely to have a sponge there to just give us that extra traction. But it depends on, like if you've got too much sponge in there, it's going to get in the way of really nice humeroscapular rhythm. After many years of working with this, I'm down to one of these magic sponges, which is lovely because it's self-adhesive. And I've got also the right height of chin rest from Claire Stefani. So those things are a part of a discussion that you would have with her, just making sure you've got the right shape and height of chin rest for your jaw, and that you've got the right amount of sponge in here. So you don't have to think that you have to just toss that sponge away, but you could experiment with different heights of sponges, and one that's small enough that allows, when I'm in first position, this has fallen right back into neutral. When I shift up, it comes forward with the rest of the arm. But then people get stuck there. They shift down this way, and then this is still on the back of the instrument. So part of shifting down is knowing how to release that back again to neutral without rolling into violin shoulder. And that's what we're going to do next. I want to give you an exploration that will teach these muscles in the middle of playing, because you can't stop and do this every time you feel like you're rolling forward. So we have to have another way to get in there. Any other comments before I leave that? Okay. So this is basically what we just did. And it's, no more shoulders back. This we're gonna find center by undoing the rotation. This is what a shoulder blade looks like. If you're looking at a student from the back, there's the ridge that you can go searching for. There will always be some sticking out here, and it will be closer to the spine. When you take it into the elbows up, which is what I call this, elbows up, you will find that ridge, go ahead and try it and feel for the ridge now, and it will be on a very steep line. Possibly it will feel even vertical to you. And you're going to need to go searching for it way over at the side, way over here, and go down. And then, so we've taken it past neutral. When we bring the arm down, it brings us into a neutral. And you'll notice that this line is way over at the side. This is the side of my shoulder blade. My spine is way over there, and everything in here is ribs and muscles. So the shoulder blade is truly at the side of the body. And when you did this and you reset it, you got some of that. You got your shoulder blades further away from each other without pushing them and rounding your spine. You just got a more centered shoulder region. And then if we want to talk about arm joint 2 and the effects that this has on it, when we are round shouldered, the socket tilts forward like that. So the ball is trying to sit cockeyed in a socket, a tilted socket. When we bring it into elbows up, the socket gets tilted back ever so slightly. And when we bring it down, ideally, we will be much closer to an upright socket. And that's when the ball is going to track. Remember yesterday we were talking about the tracking of the knees. Well, this is where it's going to track most efficiently from, because it's sitting in an upright socket where it's just cupped and it's perfectly shaped for the ball. So it's not just arm joint 1, it's also arm joint 2 that we are addressing for round shoulders when we do that. And in order to maintain that, and for this to become our new place of, neutral, to be mapped semi-permanently in this place for neutral. We need more strength from these muscles, because when that socket gets tilted forward, the ball will get kind of thrown, it'll kind of get dropped into the front half of the socket. It'll start favoring the front half and not be sitting in a nice meeting, a nice central meeting in the socket. And it's these muscles, these two rotator cuffs, whose job it is to be strong enough to keep that centeredness, to make sure that the ball is not into forward rotation all the time and sitting on this edge of the socket. Now, again, it's probably never actually right on the edge, but just so that you can visualize it, that's the direction it's going. And if it's off even by a millimeter, the brain can feel that as a mile. So we want a centrated joint at all the joints of the body. That's balance, is when the bones are centered. Let's take an arm straight up into the air. And once again, find, where you put your deodorant on, and find that ball. You'll notice I drew a little green happy face. So have your own imaginary little set of eyes right there, so you can track where that surface is traveling. And now, if you bring your arm down and purposely go into a round shouldered place, this bone has rotated forward, which means your happy face is now peeking out the back. It's gone in this direction because it's getting dumped into the front of the socket. So if you start to establish a bit of a relationship with that surface, you can start to track where it's looking at. Get to know it up here first, bring it down the side and if you've done an elbows up, then it will be sitting right in the socket. But if you are in round shoulderedness, it's going to start peeking out the back from behind you, because the whole shoulder blade has been pulled up the back and the collarbone has rotated forward. And then, so when you did your elbows up, this is partly what you were doing. You, by taking the arm into that shape, you backwards rotated, which means your happy face is peeking out the front. And that sets up a lovely, tip of the shoulder blade moving away from the spine. And collarbone is up at this end and down at the other. And so, these are just different views of what you just achieved by doing that elbows up. So I recommend putting a happy face on there. It can help you track it. And we're going to be on the floor in a moment doing some of this stuff. But finally, let's just take a look at the double whammy thing. We've already kind of covered it. We've said that if grandma said, sit up straight or get your shoulders back, and we didn't undo the forward rotation and we just pull it straight back, we're in big trouble. And that's what happened to this poor 14-year-old kid. Teacher constantly saying, get your shoulders down and back. And his mother sat with them diligently for a year, every single day of their practice. Teacher says, shoulders down and back, down and back, down and back. And so he ended up with this almost completely horizontal ridge on the shoulder blade. This end of the collarbone pulled way lower than the actual joint. Shoulder blade, look at this, that's his spine. And that's how much distance he had between the shoulder blade and the spine. Like, it was almost on the spine. And, this is what had happened to me too. This was my original injury 30 years ago. I woke up one morning and I couldn't raise my arm because that serratus anterior and some of these external rotators had just gone kaput. They just stopped working because I hadn't used them in so long. So no more shoulders back. We want to make sure that, this is a really over tightened rhomboid here, in here, and this is also a rhomboid, and that's levator scapulae. And then of course, trapezius on top are also tightening. So there's your two to compare with. This is our model. This is what we want to avoid, but we might want to know what that looks like for our students and ourselves. If you know that you have a winging shoulder blade, then you fall somewhere in this range of probably not as extreme as what you see there. And of course, it doesn't help as women that we have this whole glamour myth that, look at how many women on the red carpet end up in this shape with that horrible overarching in the spine and shoulder blades that are completely protruded and falling right together, and usually associated also with the head forward. So they're rounding forward in the front. You can see it very clearly here. I'm surprised this dress is even staying on her upper arm structure because it's so rounded forward. But the shoulder blade is being pulled up the back and the tips being pulled in, and then accompanied with that dumping back of the spine. Really quite common, I have to say, in teenage girls, and it's a shame. It's something I hope we can all keep an eye out for. Okay, so what do we do about this phenomenon? Besides stopping and pausing and resetting all the time, well, we learn how to send neural messages to release. This is an over-tightened pectoral minor. You can see it pulling down on the front of the shoulder blade there. We're going to put you on the floor in a minute, and I want you to imagine that this entire upper shoulder region here is like a heavy iron ball. And the rest of your arm is going to be like the chain. And the ball, we're going to learn to dangle that heavy iron ball passively from the chain. Now, those of you who've played a stringed instrument ever, I am sure at some point a teacher said to you, here, give me the weight of your bow arm. Just give it to me. Let me drop it. And the first time you tried it, they probably took their hand away and your arm was still there because there were still muscles you were trying to use to help them. And it took a while for them to really get you to just release so that it's complete floppy dead weight. It's exactly the same principle, except now we know that this is all arm. And we're going to be now asking all of these muscles, especially the upper ones, the thumb side ones, to get nice and released and soft and drippy and whatever works for you so that it can be heavy like an iron ball. So this is the ball and chain release. And again, if you have a partner that you're willing to ask for help on, this is really super for somebody else to take your arm. If I were in the room with each of you, I would take you by the arm here and have you on the floor on your back, and I would just pull up. And we often put a heavy weight, if you've got your ankle or, you know, whatever weights you found, you put that on the chest. And the person pulls up, and your job is to not help and is to release back towards the floor, not push it, but release as they're pulling up, and then they pause, and then you release back. If you cannot, if you don't have a partner right now to help you with that, and most of you probably don't, just watch this video, and then you're going to see if you can find some kind of doorknob or railing to hang a scarf over. And you're just going to make a pulley system. One arm is going to do the pulling, the other arm is going to do the releasing. And you're going to wrap your scarf around the palms so that you need to grip as little as possible. There's less muscular work happening here, and they're just kind of caught in the wrap of the scarf. And you get yourself so that you're directly underneath the doorknob, and you put your weight on the arm that's closest to the door. This arm is doing all the work. So in this video, I'm releasing the right arm. I pull with this arm and I pause. During the pause, I ask for complete dangling iron ball, heavy, melting muscles. And it's a lot easier if you've got something heavy of 4 or 5 pounds sitting on there to enhance the heaviness that you're looking for. And then you pull some more and you see if you can not help. But it will always want to help at first, and so then you just release it. And by the end of the video, I'll just skip ahead, you'll see that the back of the shoulder region has been pulled right up off the floor. But my job is always to send a message to soften and release in this area. So it's front of the arm, possibly even into bicep, but mostly deltoid and pecs. And you're just going to release away from the force that's pulling the arm up and make it as passive as you can. And I mean, it sounds it is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple and essential for us to be able to then pick up a violin and a bow and go, oh, there's a force in my hands now, kind of like a force of somebody pulling my arm that way. There's a weight in my hands, and my response to that is going to be fall away from it. And in fact, it actually helps us raise an object rather than 100% gripping here and forcing up. So that's what I'm going to send you off and try. And if there's any questions, just holler. If some of you can even get your screens pointed at yourself on the floor, that would be helpful to watch some of you.
Can you describe what a partner would do if we had a partner? As
Yeah.
we're trying,
Absolutely. If I was my own partner, let's say I'm lying on the floor and I want to release my left side pectorals, my partner would just have me around just above the wrists like that, probably with two hands. And they would pull an inch or so and then pause, and I would release against it. Then they would pull some more and I would go, oops, I helped too much. I'm going to release against that. And just repeat, repeat, repeat. They will get tired quickly, and so will your other arm, because if you really are releasing, it's going to feel quite heavy on the other arm. And occasionally people try this without a weight on the chest, but it's so much more helpful to have that extra weight if you can find something. And if you're, wearing a shirt that you can actually slip the weight under, or even under the bra strap, that will prevent it from sliding off, which sometimes makes people tighten more. I'm just going to grab a glass of water. I will be back in 30 seconds. And it's not important if you can't let it be completely passive. Or maintain the release at first. The important thing is that you find it, and then you find it repeatedly, because it's the number of times that you're sending the message neuronally that's going to dig your neuronal groove deeper and make it become a new mapping for yourself. That's what matters, is how many times a day can I send that message to those muscles to stop doing 100% of the work. They have to do something if you're going to raise your arm in front of you. There's some of the arm raising muscles, but they're usually on 100, and we probably only need 50 or 70 at any given time. So come on back when you're ready, and let's just hear about that experience, because some of you will be frustrated. There's always somebody who's just saying, I couldn't feel it, I couldn't find it. And we'd love to hear from everybody and see if we can help anybody who's struggling, but also hear the reports of people who were able to find some release there.
I'll start.
Yeah.
I felt I had a partner like this. I felt totally relaxed. It was very easy until a very specific point where my shoulder, I had him actually go until my shoulder was fully off the ground, because I just wanted to see what that full range of motion felt like. And as soon as my shoulder started to separate from the ground, I noticed I started engaging again. So I had him do that cycle a few times of like, okay, let's go back to the most recent place that I was relaxed and test if I can keep releasing as I go forward. And I got there, but it was really interesting how there was like the first half that was fine, and then something totally shifted at a certain range of motion.
That's a great report, Zoe. Fantastic. Yeah. So bravo. That's terrific. It sounds like you're very close to being able to, well, maybe you already are applying this in your playing, just, being able to respond to a stimulus of a hand having to move through space, and the response is to just stay calm and stay back until it needs to move forward in humeroscapular rhythm. Great report. What else? was, yeah, go ahead, Carla.
So one of the things I noticed, and I didn't have the pulley, but it really helped to breathe and exhale really sort of assisted with the release.
Fantastic. Yep. And remember, your upper ribs are right there. And the more you release those muscles, the easier it's going to be for those ribs to help in the breathing. And the breathing will start coming more naturally. And yeah, that's a great report. Any other reports before we go to the next phase of this? Okay, so I don't want to wait too long because I want it still to be fairly recent in your memory, what that felt like. So the next phase is to pick up whatever's on your desk in front of you. It might be a glass of water like mine, it might be, you know, a cup of pens, but you need something with a little bit of heft. And whatever arm you did the release, whichever arm that you were practicing releasing, I want you to use that arm to pick up this object, but you're going to start with it. Let's say this is my desk it's resting on, and I'm going to pick it up with this hand. I want to just start to take about 50% of the weight of it off. You can't see it because it hasn't left my hand yet, but I've already taken some of the weight off. And even with just that little initiation of moving something that's got a weight to it, these muscles are gripping more than they need to. So I'm going to just start to pick it up and I'm go, oh, there I go. My response to that is to let that extra holding go. And then I'm going to come off an inch and I go, oh, a little bit more release there. I'm going to start to bring it to my lips and check in. Oh, look at that. It's not too bad. It's mostly released. Oh, starting to help. I can release until you can just get that up, you know, to wherever it needs to be. And you're just constantly releasing as the hand is going in that direction. And this is almost a counterweight, but it's helping lever the arm up instead of shoving it up. So there's a balance there. It's kind of a really lovely, yeah, it's like one of those scales, you know, you've got this much effort having to take this side up and this side is dropping back to help. So there's kind of there's another word I'm thinking of there, seesaw action almost. So try that, see if you can start to build in everything that you do with your hands all day long can be you practicing this. Every time you move a hand somewhere, even if it's just the weight of the finger bones themselves and there's nothing in it, can be a trigger to, oh, look at that. I didn't need that much. Oh, I can find that release, because that's going to get you quicker onto your instrument or into your conducting and responding to the weight of the thing that's in your hand. Most of us, it doesn't matter how heavy the thing is that's in front of us we have to pick up. We just go, okay, 100%. And if we're a bit more mindful about it, we can actually feel how heavy or light the object is and respond appropriately by how much muscular effort is required in the upper arm. Before Walter Carrington died, I was lucky enough to have several lessons with him. He was in his 90s. This is the fellow who spent 40 years as Alexander's assistant in the Alexander technique before Alexander died. So this was in 2004 in London. And I had one lesson with him. He was 92 or something. And he started giggling because somebody was coming in the front door and we could see we were at the window. And it was a fairly heavy looking door. It looked like it was one of those industrial type, you know, and it looked like it should be about 50 pounds, but it wasn't. It was quite light. And so he, you know, he would giggle because people would come and brace themselves. And before they'd actually experienced how much muscular effort was required, they'd be leaning their whole weight. And then of course they'd fall backwards because they were surprised by how light the door was. And so that was kind of the beginning 20 something years ago of my thinking about this, but this really is where it's key with the violin, that it's pretty light. Like it's only 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds. Viola might be, I don't know, how much is a viola? 2.5, 3 pounds. And the bow is even lighter. So being able to respond to the objects we use our hands to maneuver and knowing in the moment that we touch it of, okay, how much release can we find here is just an essential step in taking it to the instrument, which of course is loaded with memories and some emotional baggage for most of us. And it's really great to practice it on innocuous stuff like pens and pencils and mugs and water bottles. Yeah, Zoe, go ahead.
I was noticing this just now, and it's something that it's taken me a long time to figure out. And I was wondering what your experience is with teaching this and how I can support teaching this. The difference between releasing and pressing down, because I've spent a lot of time trying to release my shoulders, and I realized I was actually trying to drop them much lower than they naturally needed to be. So even as, and I've done so much work on this and I still do this, even as I was picking up this water bottle, it's pretty heavy. So maybe I'm making this hard on myself, but I was noticing my instinct to go like this.
Yeah, good for you.
Instead of just release to wherever it needs to be.
Yeah.
But how do I support that in my students whose bodies I can't
So
feel?
two answers to that. The first one is that as you're doing it, I would focus more on letting it fall back as if you were still lying on the floor, just like the ball and chain. You pick it up and you think about releasing it. Rather than thinking so much down, think just letting those muscles go. And of course, the more you do the ball and chain, the easier that becomes. And then the second point is if you go back to this thing, which we did with that under the arm. And again, because you've got a partner there, that's perfect. If you get the partner to stand beside you and just, put their fingers through and just start lifting, and your job is to release down. It's the same exercise, it's just in a different direction, releasing down on top of the upwards force, because it's the upwards force that, this is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is having enough support under here, like the peanut butter sandwich, that the top piece of bread can just rest on the plate, which is being lifted from under. So use these to train where neutral is from, just what does that feel like to just drape? But I'm never going to end up actually pulling down, because and your partner can even jiggle a little bit. If you're pulling down, you will know, because he won't be able to jiggle. So it has to remain a soft passive draping in both of those exercises. And if I was doing the ball and chain with you in the room, I would also be jiggling a little bit. That's something else a partner can do, because you should be able to feel the reverberation of that jiggle all the way through to here. And if there's some muscles in this region that are, as you say, trying to do it for you, you won't get that jiggly reverberation. So those are a few things to try to add into that. And I definitely do this. I do this with students in the violin studio, and occasionally when they're really bunged up, I have them on the floor I do a whole lesson just on ball and chain, and I keep checking in on it. And the most important phase of all of that, once you know what that feels like, is to just be practicing it with your objects and see how much release you can find, particularly in that direction, to undo the forward rotations. Yes, Ina, is that a question?
Yeah, I don't know if I did something wrong, but when I was doing the release here, lifting this up, I felt like my bicep muscle was working extra hard.
Okay.
I don't think that's supposed to happen.
No, it's definitely part of the thumb side arm, part of the arm trying to do it for you. So send a specific message to the bicep region to melt like butter, or drip like water, or like melted chocolate, whatever image, come up with something that works for you.
Yeah, I tried. I couldn't get anything. Like, I don't know if it's because I was holding it like this versus like this. I don't know if that.
Maybe you need to wrap more so that you're not gripping, because that, of course, is going to bring on some of the bicep. So you want to feel like the hand is just caught in the scarf, and there's very little of this work going on in the hand. And that will take you also to, when you pick up objects, just how little you actually have to actually grip the object, that you can have a much softer approach, like we've all been taught to do with a bow or a baton. It's bare minimum amount of muscular work to support the object in the hand itself. So that might also help. But keep working with it. It's all one system. It's thumb side muscles that over tighten. Olga, what was your question?
Just something to Ina, in addition to experimenting with lifting like this and lifting like this, you may want to start holding the object closer to your body, and lifting it, and obviously that's going to be a little easier, and then gradually extending and still looking for the release. So experimenting this way and this way, and also like almost very close to your body, and then more like in real life extension.
Yeah, great ideas. And Suzanne. Oh, we're not hearing you. Oh, no, now we are. It just took a minute.
A general question. I had some discussions with people who favorize or find a wonderful Yehudi Menuhin's approach. And I thought usually what he's doing with movement of arms and is somehow sympathetic, but they have been told that first the violin is hanging down with the head, so the head down and like this, and then the shoulders go with them forward. And then slowly they go up, and on this position, the head goes a little away, then arrangement of the violin and the head goes back. And this is taught, and I had big discussions, but this is totally against what we learn with you. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can see, where he arrived at thinking if we go completely floppy first and then we just
Yes.
gradually come out of it, that might work for some people who already know what it feels like to fully release neck muscles and pectoral muscles, but that's not most of us, especially today. So I think it's really a terrific thing to learn how to release in the other direction. I should also say, we didn't do it today, but when you get better at it, put yourself along the foam roller again with same way we did earlier, and do it around that ball and chain around that. And because it's going to let the shoulder blade drop even more around the curve of the roller, and you might even find more release. But it might be dangerous to start with that until you've got more control over how to let this go. But thanks for sharing that, Suzanne, because it's a classic example of pedagogy that's might work for some people, but I don't think it's a hard and fast rule.
And somehow the next effect was that they have been told, finding this position of the left elbow, they go on with the hand on the right shoulder, and then they just go like this, and then there's a tension, and this what you told, this going back and leaving, this will be, I think, a big work to find.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
okay.
It's still based on the assumption that this is not part of the arm. The mismapping is still behind that kind of thinking that this is torso and that this is arm. And so that movement, is already missing the forward swing and softening here, but the forward following of the collarbone. Yeah, so when we take that into plane, let's just do a quick rundown on how this applies to technique. Certainly going to the frog. When we come to the frog, we want this to release away, but the shoulder blade is still following around. So if I don't release away, I get something that either looks like a hunch or a pulling down, which would be this. Right, that's the hunching, or the squeezing in. Right, where this is all bunched up here. And after having done enough of that release work, you can get to the frog like that. And you can probably hear the difference in the resonance. And maybe I don't have my sound. I don't have my sound on again. There's an enormous amount of resonance when you come to a frog like that. Whereas this, it's compressing the sound. So that's, coming around like that Pierre Fournier picture, coming around the oak tree idea, like we did with the hip joint yesterday, coming up and over. It's the same thing here. If you're releasing back here, it's going to allow the shoulder blade to come around the ribs. When I did this version of crunching in, the shoulder blade is actually traveling towards the spine when we do that. So that's the primary thing on all that work that we have to do, all the brush strokes and the off the string stuff in the lower half of the bow. This is essential for having that nice Sophie Mutter shape. And then of course it's the same principles over here when we have to shift up. We don't want to be pushing from here. Remember, the caboose doesn't pull the train. So we have to soften here consciously in order for this to follow around the side. But I can go, if I'm letting the collarbone move up and forward, I get a lot more space in the underarm. especially if this is staying soft and released into ball and chain. And I can come a long way. There's no discomfort there. Yeah, I only get uncomfortable when I crunch in and I'm tightening in here or pulling in. So this has everything to do with our discussion on humeroscapular rhythm yesterday. If we won't have great humeroscapular rhythm if we are overworking in these muscles. So fourth fingers shifting up and going to our lower strings. Same movement to different degrees. We just have to soften back here so that it's not grabbing. So that, I mean, basically just raising a violin and putting it up there requires learning how to soften these muscles. Now, there's one more important thing, which is how do we start to learn to engage on the other side that we have to get to before we finish up and go to the guided explorations. So I think I'll skip this video. I think it will be easier to just show you and have you try this on the floor. This is number one. If you go looking to strengthen muscles anywhere in the body and you haven't released the ones that are already overworking and doing all the work, you're going to be in a tug of war. So absolutely essential that you get comfortable with this idea first, but in a few days, maybe in a week, you can start adding this next one into your regular floor work. Remember we said when we were looking at the happy faces on the ball that when you do external rotation like that, that little happy face is going to start peeking out the front. So I'd like you all to take an arm, you can even guide it with your other hand if you like, and really make sure that in your mind's eye you're seeing the ball right there rotating in that direction, backwards. The hand is going palm up to the ceiling and possibly past it if you can. And then pause and see, can I release any of this overworking stuff here, even in that position? Oh, interesting. New set of muscles starting to work under here. And that's the basic principle of what we're going to try on the floor. The only difference is when you do it on the floor above your head and you keep releasing here so that these aren't doing all the work, these are going to have to work even more because you've got the weight of the entire arm stuck out behind you and gravity is making it feel heavier. So this is basically all it is. Just watch very quickly and then you're going to try it and then we'll take a 1-minute break. So there's the rotation. So the back of the palm of the hand is looking at the floor. You take it part way and you pause, just like ball and chain, and you soften, just like ball and chain. That's essential or you will not get these guys starting to fire. And then you become really aware of that pinky side of the arm and looking for muscular work. And remember, it's serratus and rotator cuffs. And don't let the hand touch the floor because then you're not using the muscles anymore. Only go, though, if anything feels dangerous, you stop. So go ahead and try that. It's pretty simple. It doesn't require anything except being able to release those front chest muscles we were just doing. So it's called external rotation or backwards rotation. I would start with your fingers pointing at the ceiling first. Just stay there for a few moments until you really feel the back of the shoulder blade is so heavy that it's dropped right into the floor. Yeah, that's it. Just let it fall right into the floor. You could also start this off with weights, but it's not necessary after you've done ball and chain, and then start to take it back behind you. It doesn't matter if the elbow is straight. Some of you will actually have more success if you let it bend a little. You can explore that. But every few inches that you take it closer to the floor with the palm down, you have to pause and make sure that you've released the thumb side stuff. And assuming that some of you are starting to feel a little bit of muscular work going on, oh, I forgot to say, it'll help you if you think about the magnet between your ribs. If you get a little bit of that going, that'll help start triggering the deep support for the arms as well. So that's important. Make sure you can still breathe though. And then if you do start to feel today that there's a little bit of work happening along that back rim of the armpit, pinky side, you can just start doing a little bit of gentle waving around of the arm, just a couple of inches. And make sure that you're initiating from the underside of the arm and that you're softening the top piece of your sandwich and you're letting the support come from the plate underneath or the butler's tray, whatever works for you. Let everything else drop down on top of that new muscular work. And that's in a few days. If you have found that sensation already today, and not all of you will, but if you have, you can that extra little bit of movement you're doing will strengthen those muscles very quickly, as long as you're releasing the ones on top. All right, so in the interest of time, because we're at 2:29, we have 1 minute here, and I know that Suzanne had a question she'd like answered about the training process. I'm just going to quickly talk through the steps of that, and then we're going to take up what you felt, and but you guys can be stretching during all of this, and or if you have to run to the bathroom and the training information doesn't affect you, then go ahead and do that. However, the first step where several of you have already been or already are is the affiliate level. You sign up to the ABME Association, and you should be getting emails from them weekly. And in that stage, you should be reading as many of the books as possible. So not just the violin ones, but a whole bunch of other instrument ones. Get them ordered, and you're having lessons at that same time, so that you can uncover your own mismappings. You know, you're doing courses like this. If you find another course with somebody else, then that's another prerequisite. You need 2 of those before you get licensed. So that's step 1. And then after we've had enough lessons and I've seen some of your journals, that's the other thing. You should be journaling and sending them to me periodically. Even if I don't ask for them, just, once every couple months, shoot me an email and say, here's some revelations I've had or observations, or this is another mismapping I uncovered. And that helps, but between the lessons and reading your journals, that helps me know when you're ready, when you've absorbed enough information and changed enough of your own movement patterns. We move you to the next phase, which is the licensure phase. That's when you pay a little bit more and you receive all of the teaching manuals. And you probably are still going to continue having some lessons, but you've got this enormous amount of wealth of information about how to teach this stuff to other people. So we take you through slide by slide what to say about this image and what are the common mismappings. And that you get a little bit more independent in that phase because we're just basically walking you through how to teach this stuff. So the first phase in the affiliate is all about your own body and remapping your own work. And the second phase is about how do I teach this to somebody else. So, it's just a matter of having enough lessons and having read enough and having journaled enough that I can then, to get into that second phase, I need to be able to write a recommendation letter to the other 6 sponsoring teachers, and they look at your CV and my recommendation, and then, nobody has been turned down yet, moved on into the next phase where they start working with the manuals. So that's an overview of the training process, how that works. Does that answer some questions, Suzanne? Great. Okay, super. So let's take about 1 minute, just so that we're away from the screen and we've moved, and we come back and we start looking at some of the individual issues that are coming up. Okay, let's carry on. If you're there. Carla, Zoe, and Ina, we're going to do 20 minutes each. And again, this is not where you have to play or any kind of formal performance. I just need to hear some sound so that we can discuss whatever issue is on your mind. Ina, I see you there, so would you mind going first? Great.
The originals. Okay.
And actually, maybe just before we start with you, is there anything anybody wants to say about the backwards rotation work that we did on the floor? Is there any new experience there?
I just
Oh,
am
sorry, go ahead.
sorry. I didn't expect to be able to get my arm back.
Uh-huh.
So, because that's the side I had the frozen shoulder on.
Right.
And so I think the idea of actively trying to push something back rather than melt that is huge. And I want to cry.
Okay. That's yeah, there's a lot of emotion involved in this stuff. When I first met Barbara, I was just in tears. Like that week, it was like everything she said was like, "Oh my God, how come I didn't know this 30 years ago?" Yeah. So just yeah, lots of compassion because it's new information. Thanks, Margie. Danielle, I think you were also going to say something.
I just struggled, which I'm surprised. I thought it would be easier than it was. And in particular, I struggled with rotation this way to get the palm. Or wait, no, sorry, this way. Sorry, this, I was really surprised how hard that was. And I don't know if I was trying to do something weird, but like how, like burning
Yeah.
the outside. I
Yeah.
was really surprised.
That burning is probably a good, as long as it was the kind of burning, it was like, ooh, new muscle. That's exactly
Yeah, like
that's exactly
that is-
what you want to be strengthening. So keep
yeah,
at it as long as it doesn't feel like dangerous burning. And you'll get there a lot quicker the more you release here, the more strength you're just rebalancing that whole shoulder girdle. Yeah, and it is hard at first. The first time I tried it on my bow arm, it was trembling so badly I could only get halfway.
I was shaking and couldn't like I was
Right. That's the imbalance we're talking about, and it will get fixed. I think I fixed mine within 5 days because I did it a lot. But there you go. Wonderful. By the way, I love the birthday hat on your skeleton. Very cute.
students, they're present.
Yeah.
No, it's Mr. Bones, and they gave him a birthday, so whatever.
Love it. All right, Ina, let's go over to you.
Okay.
So tell me what, in your few minutes together, what would you like to pursue from what we just covered over the last 3 days?
I think breathing and performance anxiety related things.
Great. Let's
That's
do
okay.
it. Yep, absolutely. So talk me through a little bit what your previous strategies have been with performance anxiety in particular.
Yeah, so I've been following a lot Noah Kagayama and what's his name? Dan Green. Sorry. Don Green.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I read his latest book, and actually it helped me recently. But I feel like the breathing exercise we did, it helped me a lot when I messed around with it after the class. So I want to kind of see what else is possible.
Great, super. And what specifically did you find most helpful from that breathing work that we did on the first day?
Yeah, so before, I mean, I feel like, I guess I felt like when I incorporated it along with the bow speed, I felt like I was being more intentional with the breathing rather than just like random kind of remember to breathe thing.
Right.
Because otherwise, remember to breathe becomes more performance anxiety.
Right.
You know?
One
So,
more thing that we're expected to juggle. Yeah.
yeah, so just having that kind of intention and kind of making it work with everything, it really helped me.
Great, super.
Again, it was only one day.
Yeah, yeah, it is. All of this stuff we've done in our 8 hours or 7 hours together is about making it one thing in our musical expression, which is that, we're just trying to free the body so that the main focus is on singing and experiencing that music. I'm going to just start your lesson with another bit of wonderful wisdom from Barbara, which is also one of my favorite quotes of hers, which is that our job as performing artists is what the job that we've been charged with is to experience the music in the same way and at the same time that we want our audience to experience it. So that's quite a mouthful if you break it down. But first of all, it assumes that we care about our audience and we want them to have a good experience. And it also assumes that we have enough of a musical intention that we know what we want the music to say so that we'll speak to them. And then the thing that blew me away about that statement was I'm supposed to experience the music while I'm playing it. I'm not supposed to make the music happen. So this idea that it becomes much easier if we just let the composer inform us in the moment, or we experience what the composer put on the page, and it takes a lot of pressure off of us having to create something, and we just have to experience what's already been created. I mean, obviously we're moving in ways that we have trained in for that to happen, but it's an interesting little twist. So I just want you to kind of sit with that for a while. And the breathing is definitely a part of how we are experiencing the phrase. So, why don't we just do some warm-ups? You probably have something ready to play, but before we even get into the piece, well, no, let's just let you play maybe 3 or 4 lines of something. Just in kind of, don't think about it too much, just play for us.
Okay. I'll play some Prokofiev slow movement.
Wonderful. Oh, Ina, your original sound must be off.
It says it's on, but I'm going to check in the audio settings.
Okay, thank you.
Um,
You were pretty
it says
blotchy.
it says it's. You know what? I'm gonna choose a different microphone. Hold on.
Sorry about that. It would be really nice to hear you clearly.
Yeah, it's on, but for some reason it's not working.
Okay.
Okay. It's working now.
Fantastic. Beautiful. Let's just take that much. Gorgeous. Bravo. So, tell me a little bit about what that was like for you.
I was a little shaky, but breathing helps me bring me back to the music. But again, kind of going back and forth between.
Kind of coming in and out of it a little bit. Yeah. Can I ask you to try just the opening 2 measures maybe in your old way, purposely just kind of, you know, last week, if somebody had asked you to play those two measures and just kind of notice at the end of it what your breathing normally does.
Okay, I don't remember. No.
It's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's worthwhile though.
Maybe like that.
Yeah, that's all. So can you give us some insight onto how that felt different than what you did the first time?
Yeah, I felt, I mean, it was more reluctant. Well, I guess both of them felt a little reluctant on the first note, but this one more so. And I just felt more tight this way.
Okay. Okay, good. That's great feedback. Um, so because you're already, okay, well, let me ask you a couple questions about breathing first. In when just the mechanics of breathing, which part of that breathing segment kind of was most startling to you? Like what breathing mismappings did you uncover?
Well, I think when we were, like, for me, visualizing the ribs expanding, and putting that together with the bow speed, I think that's what was helping me a lot the other
Good.
day.
Good. Okay, fantastic. So let's just warm that up a little bit more on some open strings. Let's try giving yourself a pulse, which is not something I talked about because this breathing work also really helps us with rhythm if we have a if we ever have rhythmic or pulse problems. So I want you to see if you can I don't know if you'll be able to hear me do this. I'll try to make it audible. I'm going to do 4 pulses and I'm going to do it in a crescendo. So in a moment, my bow is going to play. I'm going to, start with a slower bow speed and do a crescendo to the tip. But before you do that, I want you to put a hand in front of your mouth. And I'd like everybody to do this at home because these are not really master classes in the sense that you're just watching. This is for you to try. And I want you to see if you can feel 4 tiny little breaths and each one gets stronger. So it'll be trying to show it so you know what I'm doing. And then notice that what your ribs are doing to do that. So we're just going to get that connection between tiny rib movement, a little bit more, bigger and biggest. Right. And the final one, you're going to feel more air on your hand. And now do it on an in breath. You don't have to have your hand there because you won't feel it on the in breath, but you can put a hand on your ribs and see if you can go. Except don't make it audible because if you're making it audible, you're using throat muscle. So just let it be silent. Let it come through your nose or your mouth. And then do the opposite. Let's make a diminuendo. And this time you can choose either inhale or exhale, whatever, doesn't matter. But have a pulse to it. So you'll start with more air. That's right. And so now what we're starting to do by kind of dividing the breath up a little bit, eventually it will be more fluid than that, but it helps us to feel a pulse if we know. This reminds me of the Tokyo String Quartet used to, like back in the old days, the first group, they would, like Suzuki students, they would have little markers on their bow. So their bow divisions were exactly the same for their phrasing, so that when they were playing a phrase together, it was like a puppeteer up here making 4 people's bows do exactly the same thing at the same time. So we're kind of doing that kind of coordination. It really, really helps to divide a bow both for pulse and for phrasing if we've matched kind of the pulse into the rib speed so that it's not just this vague idea of okay, I'm going to do diminuendo, so I'm going to go with my ribs, but actually measure it out a little bit. And it keeps the pulse in the whole body. You might have heard people say, feel the rhythm in your gut. Well, I never knew what that meant. I was trying to push my gut around, trying to make that happen. really what it is, it's your ribs and it's your breath, therefore. So let's try a few open strings now. And of course, you can try this at home if your instrument is there and you're muted. So kind of a, and then we'll smooth it out later. Good. And now try an up bow crescendo. So small breath to start.
So am I doing like almost like portato with the
You,
breath?
you can if you like, if you want to match that up with your ribs at first, and then we'll smooth it out later. Good. And now try crescendo on a down bow, but completely smooth, but still have that sense of pulse in the breath that's going to help you measure the bow. Good, beautiful. And what you did was gorgeous there because if you run out of breath as a string player, it doesn't matter. You just keep the speed going in the opposite direction. So I might have run out of breath by the middle of the bow, and then I just change it just becomes a really natural in and out. But my intention is going to tell me that the speed needs to be going a certain way. So if I'm going fast on the out, then I'm going to go fast on the in until it's time to slow the bow down, and then it'll go slower. So purposely try one where you go.
Well, I'm switching to the inhale in the middle.
Yeah, wherever you need to, but just keep the intention.
Oh, wait. Together. Oh, I'm dizzy.
Yeah, you will get it dizzy at first because it's so much air that we're dealing with at first. So now let's go back to the opening of the Prokofiev and just make sure that you feel free enough that you can change to an inhale or an exhale wherever you need to, but your intention of the phrase is still informing your ribs how fast or slow they should be going.
Sorry. Sorry again.
Very, very free. That was a very different opening.
Okay, try again.
Mm-hmm. Good. Tell me how that was for you, Ina.
Well, I changed like half of my bowings and fingerings.
Perfect. That's perfect. That means that you weren't playing the violin, you were playing Prokofiev. You know what I mean? You didn't have to have this set thing in order to make the phrase was so powerful and moving to us. And you did it in the moment because your musical intention was dictating your movement rather than habit dictating your movement. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't make a plan and stick to it with fingerings and bowings. There's a really lovely security about doing that. But the fact that you could just stand up and improvise that because your breathing and the musical phrase needed something different in that moment, that's freedom. So that's, I think, going to be important to play with. Tell me a bit more about the breath as you were doing that.
I don't know. I like halfway through, I forgot what I was doing, and then I don't know.
That's why we start with open strings. And in about a month, it's going to be so trained into everything that you play that it's not even going to be conscious anymore. But the first steps, like learning a dance, you have to choreograph it at first. So lots of just scale work, and make a decision about, okay, my down bows, I'm going to do crescendos, and my up bows, I'm going to do diminuendos or reverse, or I'm going to do a whole scale of just diminuendos, and I'm going to make sure that my breath is reflected in my breath, but also I'm hearing the note in my head as ah, ah, and you can do it on the inhale and the exhale. Doesn't matter down bow or up bow. If you don't have to match your down bows to an exhale, or sometimes we want to, simply because the spine is going to be lengthening a bit more. And so if we want a lot of energy, you might want to do, or if you're reaching someplace, you might want to do it on an exhale, but mostly it doesn't matter for us. What matters is the speed of the ribs.
And do you recommend to plan ahead, like say for a performance, would you plan ahead to start on an exhale or an inhale, or doesn't really matter?
A lot of people like to start on an exhale, but the only thing I'll add to that is get the breath going first so that you're not trying to start, that you're not holding the breath and then going, so,
So start the same breath as, and the first note kind of enters in the middle of that breath.
exactly. It's a lot like playing chamber music where somebody is playing the line and you're jumping on that moving train when you join them. So you kind of get the energy or the breath moving first, and then the arm, it's just so easy to ride on top of something that's already started. And usually that's easier to do on an exhale, but it's completely possible on an inhale as well. So I would practice it on both. Yeah. Any other questions about that before we wrap up?
I think no, not yet. They'll come up at some point.
Yeah. The only other thing I would say before we finish is when you're more comfortable with what's going on between the bow speeds and your breath, the rib speed, make sure that when you're dealing with performance anxiety that you're also taking in the room and using your awareness visually. In fact, let's just let you play the opening two measures again and just start by claiming your space. And that includes us here on the computer. Just look at the colors and the shapes. And that will get your nervous system in a place that's calm.
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Good. It was different for us. I wonder if anybody else wants to speak to how that made you feel different as an audience member. Did anybody notice how that changed your experience listening? I see people nodding. Yeah. Margie, you want to say anything about that?
Something about your movement, just kind of, it wasn't like you were just playing for the microphone.
Right.
Yeah, there was just more freedom. And the sound every time you've played is just like more and more lovely and engaging. Great job, Ina.
Yeah. I think it's exactly what Margie said. It was a little bit like that clip we saw of Perlman playing, that when that moment when the eyes come out to the audience and there's just an awareness, we know that we're here. So it's like an invitation in, that we're all in this together. That's how it felt. A couple times you brought your eyes up and you were in the room with us, even though we're thousands of miles apart. So it makes it better for everybody. So that's something to continue. I didn't want to throw all of that at you while you were working on your rib movement, but definitely don't forget about it. It's an important aspect of dealing with performance anxiety.
Thank you.
Super work. Thank you so much, Ina, for being one of our players. Zoe, why don't we go to you and then we'll finish with Carla. So just come on and tell us a little bit about what you'd like to work on.
I think the biggest thing that I want to improve on is inclusive awareness. I just played another graduate recital on Sunday. More stoked than ever. I've never played so well. I finally integrated all the stuff I've been working with Lisa on. Yeah, I've never actually left a recital and been like, that was great. I had a really good time.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And a lot of that is a big shift in all the emotional, mental work that I've been doing as well, because there were mistakes, sure.
Yeah.
But the focus was on trying to integrate what I've learned since my injury, and I did that, which was amazing.
Fantastic.
The thing that was a little, I don't want to say frustrating, but that I really noticed on stage was the impact that my attention shifting had on my playing. So if I had my inclusive awareness focus in the places that were most useful, I was comfortable, I had no anxiety, I sounded beautiful, I had full control, I could create, I was having a great time. And as soon as my attention started to shift outside of myself, like towards the audience, not like to include them, but like, what are they thinking? Oh, they're there. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I could feel emotionally and physically and musically an instant effect. And I know that this is just a lifelong mindfulness practice, but that's kind of the big rock now that I want to focus on, because I feel like I have the pieces and I'm still working on the pieces. But I want to work on having the presence to really choose all the pieces in the moment.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, you've done so much great work already. You've clearly, and this is just what, how many years have you been working with Lisa?
Like 6 months.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Okay. I thought it was you'd been there a couple of years with her. Okay. Well, that's marvelous. I think we're going to let you play in a minute, but what I want you to mess around with is that quote of Barbara's that I started with, that that our job is to experience the music in the same way and at the same time as you want the audience to. So if as soon as the brain has gone to that other thing, like, oh God, what is so and so thinking of me right now? We've stopped doing our job. And I think her even using that language of it being a job really struck me. It was like, oh yeah, like when I, had a job waitressing, I had a job. Somebody was paying me. I had a list of things that were my job description. And it was very simple. I did those things and they paid me money, and that was the exchange. So I think if we can kind of go on to stage instead of like this stupid culture that we live in of creating stars, it becomes an ego. It's about us instead of about our job. And the job is to respect the composer and to experience the composer in the moment. So the more we practice, even in the practice room, experiencing every note and refining, and I didn't really experience that note the way I'd like to. So what do I have to do with my movement so that I can experience it the way I'd like to hear it? That kind of really thinking about it as a job, and that you have a responsibility to fulfill that, it really reverses the tables prevents the brain from going there very much about what are they thinking about me, because we're too busy doing our job. So let's let you play whatever you've got. And I mean, you can do one of two things. You can either start and purposely kind of do it your old way, whatever that is, let your mind wander to those scary places so you have something to compare it to, or you might just remember well enough what that feels like. And you can just start messing around. I'll leave that up to you. Just tell me which way you're gonna start before you play.
Okay, let me know if this is too many things to focus on, but I was going to play the opening of the third movement of the Brahms Second Sonata, because it's all in the G string. And and I would really love more freedom of motion. It's very easy for me to get stuck. I also notice a lot lately that I keep moving this way for some reason. Um,
Huh.
and
Using the
I,
spine to come around.
yeah, I don't know, but that's like totally locking this up.
Right.
And that's all tied into the inclusive awareness piece of,
Right. Right. Being able to have your whole body in your awareness. Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
And all-
let's do two approaches then. Let's only play a few measures since we don't have a lot of time. And the first time, I just want you to focus on experiencing the music and making that the focal point at the same time as you know the color of the walls around you, and you know where, about the fairy lights behind you, and just the room. And even looking on the screen, knowing that what colors you're seeing on the Zoom screen, just let those colors live there. Um, and do that first so that it's a really inclusive, whole room, whole experience as you're experiencing the line of music. So maybe 4 measures or maybe 6 at the most. And then we'll start talking about bringing that awareness more into the whole body for this issue. Beautiful, such a beautiful piece, and a gorgeous sound on your C string there. Um, so can we now try the idea of you ask yourself the question, how much information do I need from the music and from the instrument? And can I try to experiment with where I don't need information, letting my eyes come up from either the music or the instrument? That's the only thing I noticed, that you were probably peripherally aware, but let's just see if we can take it one further step and actually have some freedom in the eye muscles to move for an instant until you need more information. So the first step is figuring out where you do and don't need information with your eyes.
I'm glad you said that. I've always played everything from memory. This is the first recital that I've ever played with music. And I chose to do that because there wasn't a requirement to play from memory. And it just lessened my anxiety so much. And I decided to prioritize my experience of this recital rather than accomplishing this goal that I have to memorize things. So the fact that even looking at music is so strange to me. But I think a piece of that will be, yes, being able to be more flexible with it.
Oh, that was beautiful. Tell us a little about that experience from your end.
Um, yeah, it was nice. I felt much more open. It was a nice experience to be able to kind of cycle and move. I think that kind of kept the energy moving, as I like to talk about. When I was focusing more on my instrument and the paper, I felt like the energy cycle was right here.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And we felt it. It was the same thing that Ina gave us. We felt like um, you were including us in the experience because you were including the room. Um, your shifting is beautiful and really nicely in tune. I'll just share briefly, when I was learning the Franck Sonata last movement, the shift up to the high A, for whatever reason, I was tightening before it and it was flat, even though in the practice room I'd done it 1,000 times and I knew where the note was. But as soon as I started practicing very consciously right before the shift, opening my periphery out off of the page, I didn't even move my eyes, but I just saw the cars going by on the street. It was in tune every single time. So there are techniques like that. Shifting isn't the only one, but it's a good one to practice it on. especially if we have a bit of anxiety about having to go high up the string, which we're going to talk about next, with your arm and the actual movement of it. But the muscles will stay freer if you can make that if the eyes are free first before that shift happens. Even if you need to watch the hand, if you feel you need information there, and sometimes we do when we shift, just make sure that you're also seeing the pink over there and the blue over there, or whatever it is. So that segues us nicely into just talking about the movement of shifting, which we haven't gone into very much with everybody yet. Let's put the instrument down for a minute, and everybody try this with us from your own place. Get your right hand on the left collarbone, and maybe even before we do that, just do a 10-second shortcut of ball and chain. Grab yourself by your own forearm bones and just pull forward a little bit and then release back against the forward pull, releasing those thumb side muscles. Pull a bit more, release. You'll get good enough at doing it on the floor eventually that you can just recapture this in a matter of seconds by doing this sitting up or standing. And then we're going to air shift a few times. So get your fingers on the collarbone, and you've softened these muscles here now. And I just want you to swing the arm up as if we were going to shift up the string. But when you get there, see if there's extra muscular work. See if you can soften back. You just saw me do it there. So I shifted up. Oh, a little too much. I'm going to release into that. And, and you can come even if you have a bit of momentum with that swinging of the arm up and over. As long as you feel the collarbone moving under your fingers, and then you find that release, you're going to be quite comfortable in those extreme places especially when we're on our lowest strings. So I wonder, without the spine spiraling, because you're not doing it right now, but you mentioned that you noticed that. See how far can you go without the spine doing that? How far in front of the body can you get? Like, can you get your elbow almost in front of your nose? Yeah, right. And then pause there and do a ball and chain and see if you can release, like what tends to overwork. Yeah, there you go. I saw it. So that's kind of how you want to take it into the technique of shifting or putting a fourth finger down, is having a bit of momentum to get yourself into that place so that the collarbone and shoulder blade will definitely follow, and then releasing into it. And the other thing that I didn't talk about very much today, but that I want everybody to realize, is that you want to be able to feel that end of the ridge is higher than this end of the ridge, no matter how far in front of the body you're taking it, like in a down bow to the tip. Just making sure that this is releasing enough that you also feel that angle instead of it being pulled up the back into that flat space. So you've got two things I'm giving you here to focus on. One is the release once you've gone into the shift place. And the other is just checking in every time in your practice room to make sure that you're mapping this being higher than this end of the ridge. And that will guarantee you, when you know that you haven't done one of these. I'm exaggerating so you can see it, but rolling this forward, and that your collarbone has remained at a neutral. So what are you finding out there before we go back to the instrument? Are you able, I saw you find some release there. Great. Are you able, without putting your fingers back there, to feel the angle of the ridge of the shoulder blade?
Not without just imagining that it's there.
Okay, so get your fingers back there and palpate it, and find the ridge, and with your fingers there, if possible, swing your arm up. You don't have to go as far in front of the body. Just swing it up. Find your release in the pectorals and the upper arm, and notice, what kind of angle is it on? Do you have an angle that goes down now, or is it still kind of coming across?
No, it's going down.
Great, super. So just that awareness, and you might need to do it 150 times, I don't know, with your fingers there, to just really start. And I would make sure everybody's doing it on the other side too, that just like where where your nose is, where that angle is and what shape it's in. because that's going to be your trigger for in the middle of playing. You're going to release here and you're going to go, oh yeah, I feel the spread of the shoulder blades and I feel that outer edge now going higher than the lower edge. Really important bony landmark for that work. So let's put the instrument into the mix now, and just the instrument, not the bow. And you don't have to try to aim for the shift up there. Just see if you can shift anywhere, but still have that feeling of momentum. You're kind of throwing the arm up and then pause and find the release of the ball and chain muscles. And then when you shift down, this is really key for this region of the body, make sure that part of your downwards shift is the falling back of the front. So it won't be touching your rest as much once you've shifted down. When you shift up, it will come forward a little bit into your rest, into the shoulder rest. And part of shifting down is actually letting those pectorals go. It's going to help bring the arm back to where you started. Yeah, good. Okay, do a few more of those and let me watch you do that. Good, and now do it with a bit more abandon, just a bit more of a throwing of the arm into, yeah, good, and then check and see if there's release. Good. Very nice, Zoe. Good. And just, I'll get to add one more thing to that before we try it with the bow, and that is a little Donald Weilerstein bit of pedagogy, that when we shift up, especially if we're really free and not grabbing here, you're going to see the scroll have a little bit of a scoop. That's what he called it. And even shifting down, I'm going to drop the violin down, which lets my hand fall with gravity, and then I bounce back up. And the reverse is true when I scoop shifting up. I scoop first, and then it's on the upwards that I can slide my hand with gravity into the note. So again, we don't want to be working against gravity. We want to find ways to, okay, shifting down is there, shifting up is there when I can fall. You want to be able to fall and then bounce back up. And that means that the collarbone is free and moving because the instrument is just riding on a moving collarbone. Good. That's the idea. The scroll is actually moving because it's sitting on that. Okay, so you don't have to try to incorporate all of that. See just what you can do with finding. We're going to let you play the first shift up, pause, release, and then shift down again. So play a couple of notes before the big shift. And just keep repeating that segment over and over and just be messing with that release at the top. Good. One more time, and then we'll just talk about it a little bit, what you felt. Now just stay there for a second and see if you can find the release. I can't see it, of course, because the instrument's there. And ask yourself, where is the ridge? Can you feel that it's higher on the outside? You might not until you've done it 1,000 times, but go looking for it at least. And then without the bow, just do your downwards shift and let the front of the shoulder region fall away from the instrument. Yes, and you've got more of the instrument between the collarbone and the jawbone when you're in first position, and when you're shifting up, you're going to have more of this coming into contact with the shoulder pad. So how did you do? Were you able to find those releases while you were actually playing?
Yeah, I was expecting them to be here, and I was kind of surprised how much of it was actually back here.
Of
Like when I
release?
release, it's just like a dropping back into place.
Good.
A little bit right here.
Wonderful, super.
Yeah.
So wherever it is, that's what you continue working on because that's your pattern. And it's worth doing a shifting exercise like I've used Kreutzer number 11, which, and I just pause at the end of every shift and just see, oh, I'm using more than I need. I can release there. And then some downward shift, and the downward shift is actually the whole arm releasing back and away. So, it's based on just a swinging movement. Shifting up is swinging in front of us, and trying to not overwork. Shifting down is that direction. Shifting should not be a linear thing like this. It needs to be a scooping rotational thing that the whole arm is doing. So the whatever what let me frame this question better. Whatever it was that was bothering you, in that region that you felt that you were compensating with your spine for, do you feel like those are tools that will help you to find more freedom of the collarbone and shoulder blade?
Yes. The trick is, can I do it in the moment? What kind of presence do I need to have? What kind of little quick triggers of sensation can I have?
Yeah.
Also, if I'm already twisted or tight, being able to release in the moment is a big thing as well. Because it's very easy for me to just get stuck and keep compounding the tension.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of like, well, screw it. I'm already tight. What do I do now?
Yeah. Boy, do I ever hear you. So
Yeah.
certainly the breathing work in the practice room is going to help with that because it's going to get your ribs moving, and that's your torso. So if you're twisted, then it's going to help on twist. But most important for you, I'm going to say, is just practice loads and loads of downshifts. Because if you are twisting in that direction and that's your habit, that ability to just swing an arm back and that's going to undo it. It's going to unravel you. So make sure that this whole unit is a part of your downshift, that it's falling back that way. So every time you downshift is an opportunity to undo the twist and let your torso come with it, And the other thing I'll finish just by saying is that the lifting of objects throughout your day is going to be essential for you because you want to know it's the number of times that you've sent the release messages here that's going to make it a part of your playing, and a response to just picking the instrument up and, oh, I'm falling back already because there's something in my hands. So that's something you can practice thousands of times in one day because you pick up that many things every day. Well, hundreds at least. And it's going to get you there very quickly if you get a sense of that. Oh, there's a mass here, which means I need only that much work in that muscle. And practice lifting it higher and higher as you continue to release. The whole point of this, all of this last 2 hours we've talked about is if I can have something held up here without all of that muscular work overworking, it's unnecessary. So figure out what necessary muscular work means, and then raising the instrument, you will know, and it will change depending on where you are. And then you find necessary here, you find necessary here. Think that's enough to chew on?
Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being our player. Beautiful Brahms. And Carla, let's bring you online here.
Hello.
Mm. Hello. So tell us, if you can, fairly briefly about you'd like to work on this frozen shoulder issue, right?
Right. So I just had an MRI recently, and it confirmed that there were no tears to the rotator cuff, which was great. But I do have a frozen shoulder, and coincidentally, I had a session with my physical therapist first thing this morning. And some weeks ago, we had started working together, and I actually gave her on loan your 2 volumes so that she could educate herself on string players and the issues that we deal with. And she has found that enormously helpful in her practice. So I wanted to tell you that. But what we discovered this morning was that my shoulder blades, both of them, are not moving.
Okay.
And so we did this exercise with turning the hand over, and I witnessed for her the inability to do what I can do without any hesitation. Her response to that was it probably is related to everything going on in the shoulder, but also that I'm hypermobile
Yeah.
in my joints, which is a curse.
It is a curse. Yeah.
Yes. So, the questions that we sort of came up, concepts to explore with you. One, when I just through this session this morning, trying to do all these exercises, I absolutely start to feel the release, but the shoulder blade doesn't move. And I watched hers move so I could sort of feel what should be happening, and it doesn't happen for me. So even on the left, I fatigue so quickly holding the instrument.
Right.
And so for me, and Jennifer, you and I have worked together before on the left side, but I have not healed all of this. But I'm so much more aware now of where I hold tension and just faulty pedagogy, frankly, from, when I first started decades ago. So the question now is, the current resting position of the head of the humerus and moving it up and forward, superior and anterior, and just any advice beyond what we've talked about today that would help that. And then since it's so easy for me to rotate, how do I really undo that?
Yeah.
If it's something I've done for a lifetime.
Well, our brains are so plastic, like the, neuroplasticity. I don't mean they're actually made of plastic, but they change so easily that it doesn't matter how old we are. We used to really believe that they lost plasticity as we got older, and they found out that is just dead wrong. They keep changing. Really, all you need to do is that thing that we did yesterday, for this region, is to just sit at the table 50 times at the breakfast table and just practice it so that you're sending a message from here. You'll know you're doing it the right way if the pinky side is not sliding. So just put your camera down and let me watch you do that a couple of times, and then we'll go to the shoulder region.
How can I do
Just
that?
to make sure that you know what the healthy way is.
Let me see. Can you see?
Jennifer, did you say the pinky should slide or not slide in the
Not
correct?
slide. Yeah, it should not slide.
Let me see if I can you sort of see now?
Yep, I can. So just yep, there you go. That's all it is. That's the healthy rotation that we are going to be drilling and drilling and drilling. And now go back and do it the other way where you end up sliding and you end up twisting. Yeah, right. And that's, as you said, allowed because you've got stretchy connective tissues. So go back to the right way now, and that's what you're going to do at the breakfast, lunch, and supper table for a few weeks
Okay.
until it's easy for you to come up off of the table and hold that bone in your fingers and just start to learn how to wiggle the radius around a non-moving ulna. Probably right now you feel that ulna is wanting to travel through space.
Yes.
Yeah. So you do enough of it on the table and this becomes easier to do. Now, you may feel the skin rolling over the bone a little bit, but if it's not snapping out of your fingers and traveling, then you've figured out how to do it one step closer to doing it in the air. But really the first step is just getting on a surface and loads of repetitions, just like learning a new skill on the violin. And you will have a neural pathway there, and it will feel wrong then to do it the other way.
So, and do this both arms.
Both arms, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then sort of I think the shifting exercise will be helpful, but is there anything else that I should really be thinking about to try to get that?
There is. When I'm watching you do that, what immediately comes to mind is, I think you've been probably without movement up there for long enough that what you want to do is like a small child. You want to give confidence to them. If their confidence has been shattered a little bit, you want to really prove to them that they can do it. So I would go to real extremes while you're monitoring. Let's leave the painful one out of the picture for a minute. So use the left side, but put your right fingers on that collarbone and just go as far as you can up to the ceiling. just reach and reach further and reach further, and then palpate the collarbone and notice that in order to do that, you have to have a collarbone that has moved way up there. Can you feel the other end of it is pointing almost up to the ceiling? It's hard to get in there, I realize. You got to roll around a bit with your finger. Good for you. That's it. I can see it. It's way up there. And now if your collarbone is that far up, that's going to guarantee that the tip of your shoulder blade is way over here now. So go ahead and reach around the back and get really clear on where if you're going to walk down the side of your shoulder blade from the armpit, and then you might find the tip of it and you can start walking up the other side a bit. It's way over here at the side. It's not anywhere close to your spine. And that is healthy humeroscapular rhythm. So your brain does know how to do it, but you have to do enough of that every day to drive home the point that it's not just when I want to reach to the most extreme place that I'm going to let that happen. It's as soon as I've started to raise a violin, like about there, I need to start letting that happen that soon. So you remember Barbara's rules, 3 rules for humeroscapular rhythm. It has to follow the rest of the arm and it has to go soon enough. And yours isn't going soon enough. It went far enough when we asked you to reach, but it didn't go soon enough. That's already better. It's already moving. That's great, Carla.
I can't even begin to do that on
No,
the other.
no,
right
I'm
now.
sure. And you probably need to tread very gingerly, and you won't be able to take it as extreme into an extreme place. So let your left side teach the right side as you're healing in those tissues, because those tissues are inflamed. But you're just going to see, like, is it painful to go to 30 degrees away? Like, 30 degrees is about there. I don't know if you can see that, but away from, that much away from the side of the torso. Can you do that without pain?
I can. It's the infraspinatus. Well, the capsule, what we worked on today was she was trying to stretch the capsule.
Uh-huh.
And it was amazing how much easier it was for me to go up. But, it's been a few hours. So this is as far as I'm really comfortably going. I can go farther,
Yeah.
but it starts.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. You're healing up very, very well. So you made it to parallel to the floor there with some discomfort. Let's not even push it that far for the next few minutes, but get your fingers back on this collarbone now, and notice that ideally before we get to parallel, about there. Sorry, this is so baggy. You can't really see my arm, but about at that angle, you want to start to encourage remember where we put that X marks the spot yesterday? You put your focus on that place where the ball is meeting the socket. And let me just demonstrate on the model here. So you've probably, I would wager, you've been coming probably way up to there before you've let any movement happen in the arm joint 1. That's usually what is causing frozen shoulder, is a misuse of that joint. So if you can go to 30 degrees and start training in the connection between the ball and the socket, which is right here, then you can start to say, okay, after 30 degrees, I've got to let that socket start to tip up, which will also mean you will feel the collarbone moving in the front. So you can palpate either in the front or back there. And just start grooving it, like mentally and also physically. You're just going to groove. Okay, oh, look at that. I can let that start following. And think about the muscles from back here. Those are the ones that you want to be connecting the 2 bones. Tell me what that's feeling like.
It hurts so much just to touch it, to touch the shoulder blade.
Okay, then don't get your hands on it. We don't want to be sending more pain messages. Can you put your fingers back on the collarbone then? And just see if you can feel the collarbone starting to follow. Yep, I can see it. Your fingers are starting to come up and then come down again. Don't go any further than that. And do that 4 or 5 times, especially if it doesn't hurt too much. That's it. You're starting to get a humeroscapular rhythm back.
I hear all kinds of
Popping.
noise.
Yeah. And that's always a sign of things not tracking
Right.
But in your case, it's also your capsule is, because it's inflamed, it's going to be tighter around the ball than a healthy one because it's so there, yeah, it's going to be probably a little bit of rubbing. But this is, going very gently. This is the work that you're going to need to be doing to rebuild the confidence that your arm actually does know how to move as a whole instead of, you kind of had the bit of the Barbie doll, well, probably a lot of the Barbie doll mismapping.
Right, right. So Jennifer, is it something that I should not try to play while I'm doing this?
I suppose it depends on how, I mean, if it's your livelihood and it's the only way you're going to make money, then I wouldn't advise I would advise people to find a middle ground. But if you can afford to just take some time off, I would.
Okay.
And I would just do these very, very gentle things. Now, that's not to say you can't pick up the violin and go from E string to A string. That would probably be a really good exercise so that you're not leaving the violin out of the picture completely. And, even playing simple folk tunes on the A and the D so that all of your awareness can be on making sure that that collarbone is floating up as you go towards the A string.
That's better.
Good.
It's better today, no question.
Good, fantastic. So it sounds like you've stumbled on a really good thing with your therapist there. She needs to do more of that so that you can start going further and, then take it to the D string, go from E string to D string as you're monitoring. But I would do loads of it away from the instrument in front of a mirror so that the visual is helping you get your kinesthetic sense on board. And that eventually, you can step away from the mirror and go, oh yeah, with my hand there, I can feel it's coming. So we can get you to a place where you can play and not fall back in, you will immediately be aware if you're starting to push down here and lift here. That's what really causes that damage at that joint and inflammation. So you just want to see if you can gently and slowly and gradually train in the whole arm movement again. But you're doing it. You got it.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, lovely to check in with you again, Carla. So I know I've gone over a few minutes and please sign off if you need to, but I also did promise that we would just do a little bit of integrating of the whole body. So if you can stay for another minute, let's just talk through how to kind of bring all of these bits of mismappings together and try to get integrated. Why don't we get your instrument if you're able and nothing's hurting, and we're going to stand for this and we'll just gently run down the checklists of things, kind of like a summary, a review. So hand on the back of the head would be a great place to start, but not the only place. You could even put a hand on the back of your head or even on the top of your head and feel what Barbara called all of Jennifer or all of Tracy or all of Carla. Feel the bottom of your feet on the floor at the same time as you feel the top of your head, and make sure that every single body cell that is contained between those two boundaries is you, and that you have a full body in your awareness from bottom of feet to top of head. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to even scan through your body. You can just feel that that's all of you between those boundaries. Then we can get, a little bit of head nodding that's gliding. And releasing the jaw back and open, unless you discovered you needed to release the jaw forward. So listen to your own pattern. Let's take the bow arm. If you're holding the instrument in your left arm, let's take the bow arm up into elbows up, and think about releasing down so that the top piece of bread is resting on some of the work from under the arm. Bring the arm out to the side and down. Feel that nice openness there with the bow arm. Or conductors, if we still have, we do have conductors in the room still, so you can alternate arms. Maybe we take the left arm up as well, so you're even. But keep a sense of the back of your head as you do that, and make sure you're not hoisting the spine up. Feel the bottom of your feet still on the ground. Bring that arm down the side. Take a couple of steps backwards and just notice if that releases anything in the lower back. See if you can get a sense of the pubic bone being across from the tailbone. So, you know, you can purposely take it into a really extreme tilt forward where the pubic bone drops lower, and then tuck where the tailbone drops lower. See if you can get over the center of those pelvic floor muscles, wherever center is between the two bony points. And then another few steps backwards will help you figure out about your knees. Remember, backwards walking will teach you where that neutral is. And then notice that you've got a dome for a foot, and you're going to drop your weight in the top of that dome. And then with the collarbone that is still somewhat at neutral from your elbows up, bring the instrument up. And you're going to start making some sound. You can just do open strings, or you can play a bit of a melody and start to take your legs into musically appropriate movement. So here's a bit of that Mozart again, with a step into the high note, and stepping back when the music goes, you know, into the end of a phrase. So just try a little bit of that, mess with that for a moment. And then open to the room around you, including those of us on your computer screen. Get a sense of the space around you as pillows of support. The air is not nothing, it's actually molecules. So let it support you on all sides, 360 degrees. Take a deep breath and feel your ribs in the back moving. And then play again and see if you can get your ribs helping your bow speed. And as you're moving into those air molecules. So you have a sense of where the walls and the ceiling are. And that is kind of the 2-minute version of the 8 hours that we just did. And eventually you can get it so that it just becomes how you move. It's how you sit, it's how you stand, it's how you breathe. But it all takes practice, and I would highly recommend time on the floor every day in constructive rest, because it's the place your brain is most receptive to making all of these remappings become your new map, so that you don't have to be so conscious all the time. I never ever think about where my feet are moving when I perform anymore. They just move where they need to move to support my musical intention. So that's where you want to get it to that. You know, you might call it automatic. I call it mapped. You've mapped it. So your brain, that's what your brain wants to do. All right. Well, I know I'm hungry. Are there any pressing questions that need answering before we say goodbye? Yes.
I just have, sorry.
That's okay. We'll go Zoe first, because I saw your hand first.
This is a silly little question, but where did you get that really cute skeleton? Because I want one.
Oh, it's a good one. I can tell you because the paperwork is here. It was a new company that I've tried, and it's called Axis Scientific. And you have to actually be willing to break the glue at arm joint number 1. But it works because there's this funny little, I didn't know if I was going to ruin it, but it's fantastic because there's this funny little plastic thing that sticks up there, and you can still hook the arm on there and move it around, but there is a little bit of glue there that you just have to be willing to snap off, and then you've got a moving arm. But everything else has bungee cords. So that's just fantastic to have a bungee cord, because the rest of them put together with screws are just, they're no good at all, no use. So that's where I got that one from. And it is a really important question actually for trainees. So getting good models is hard because some of them are crap. Somebody else had a question. Ina, was it you? No, who else had a question?
I just wanted to know whether this last hour would also be on the video, because
Thanks for asking that. And yes, we should get permission and please tell me, or if you want to tell me by email later if you're not comfortable. So I've got 2 thumbs up. Carla, what about you? Yeah? Okay. That's all we need is permission.
thank you.
Anything else? Feel free to email me. You all have my email if anything comes up over the next few weeks that you need to ask. You're very welcome. Great to see you all again, and hope I might see some of you at the conference. I don't know, but if not, we'll see you very soon again. Good luck. Bye, everybody. You're welcome.